Here we have the logo design questionnaire for the forthcoming project. Question 1 asks, what name do you wish to use in your logo design? And the clients replied, iDive. Question 2, what specific tagline do you wish to see in your logo design, if any? And they've answered none. Question 3, do we have free rein to use uppercase and lowercase characters where appropriate? The clients answered yes. Question 4, what is your business sector? They've answered virtual reality. Question 5, what kind of products and or services do you provide? They've replied virtual reality headsets and software for skydiving and deep sea diving safety. Question 6, where do you intend to apply your logo? And the clients answered on the product, website, documents, signage at conventions and merchandise. Question 7, who was your target market? And they've replied first-time skydivers and deep sea divers. Scrolling down to question 8, what kind of feel would you like your logo to project, i.e. corporate, classy, fun? And they've stated futuristic, energetic and safe. Question 9 asks, which of the following logo styles do you prefer? And the client selected icon above text, icon at the side of text, and icon and text incorporated. Question 10, which of the following font styles do you prefer? And the client selected sans serif. Scrolling down. Are there any specific elements, pictures for example, you'd like to see in the design? And the clients replied, a symbol depicting a virtual reality experience, perhaps with a sky and or sea element. Question 12, are there any specific elements you do not want to see in your design? And they've answered people. Question 13, what are your preferred colours? They've answered sky blue. Question 14, which colours do you dislike, if any? And they've replied anything other than sky blue. Question 15, how many colours would you like to use in your design? And they've answered 2. Question 16, please mention any specific existing logo styles which you favour. And the clients answered Oculus, Vive and Samsung virtual reality. So scrolling down to question 17, which represents the final question, is there any additional information which you'd like to add which would help? And the clients replied, our focus is skydiving safety. Deep sea diving safety is secondary to this. This is perhaps something to bear in mind when developing the symbol. Please also consider that we aim to market an experience rather than hardware or software. So this marks all the information we're going to be bearing in mind as we plan the logo design for the company iDive. Here we have the mood board I've constructed for the logo design project. I've obtained images from Google Images and I've constructed this collage in Illustrator in a landscape document. As stated in the questionnaire, the company deals in virtual reality experiences, manufacturing hardware and software for skydiving and deep sea diving safety. On the left hand side, you'll see that I've got images associated with virtual reality. These tend to be literal or abstract images of a head wearing the headset. Other images show the headset standing independently in a creative fashion. Amongst these images, and more focused towards the bottom left, we see logos of companies in the same sector. These are quite simplistic designs at a first glance, and some of these are text-based logos. At top right, we see the companies who are stated in the questionnaire, who have logo styles which a client favours. These include Oculus, Vive and Samsung VR. PlayStation VR also features in this area for good measure. These logos together mark a collection of the main competitors also. At bottom right, we see the literal photographs of the 7 most common VR headsets on the market, including those brands previously mentioned. Together, all of these images give me a feel of the business sector. These images will be helping me in the planning stages, particularly when I develop a mind map in the next stage. I'll also be paying close attention to the competitor logos when I design my symbol and select the font. This visual aid will help me to absorb a large chunk of the industry at a glance, and I'll also be given attention to each respective image. Whilst I'm aiming to develop a logo which is unique and attractive, I want it to fit nicely into the market, and this image, this mood board, will help me do exactly that. Here we have the associated mind map, which I've constructed with pencil and paper. Noting down the company name in the middle, which is iDive, the type of company, virtual reality, and the topic skydiving and deep sea diving, I branched out from each, spanning from one idea to the next. I used the mood board for reference, noting down observations, as well as things which came to mind. In some instances, a visual idea would come to mind, so I'd do the odd doodle. Sometimes doodles carry over into the sketching stage, so we hit the ground running. Analysing the mind map, you'll see at top left I noted down concepts related to virtual reality, including experience, assurance, pixels, comfort, and safety, to name but a few. From the word skydiving, I branched out into concepts such as clouds, bird's eye view, height, fear, and goggles. I've doodled a shape of a pair of typical skydiving goggles too. Towards the top and top right, I've got ideas mostly related to the company name, iDive. Primary ideas include ones pertaining to the makeup of the eye, such as pupil, iris, roundedness, the act of looking down, together with a range of doodles of various eye shapes, including curly forms, and one featuring a water droplet. At the bottom right, I've got concepts associated with deep sea diving. These include pressure, depth, water, sea life, waves, and ripples. All of these concepts spawned ideas as I noted them down, but there's some primary concepts I've gained from this process, particularly ones which manifested from the resulting doodles. I've found an association between skydiving and deep sea diving, in that both are performed wearing goggles which share a similar shape and bear resemblance to the typical virtual reality headset shape. I'm also keen to explore the curly and water droplet eye concepts. So I'm going to explore both of these concepts in the sketching stage, which follows next. Analysing those mentioned ideas and doodles on the mind map, I started work on the sketches for iDive. So starting at top left, I drew a primitive eye shape, which is also similar to the Oculus logo. This is a bit too simple, and so I proceeded forwards, and next I drew an eye with a water droplet in the negative space, which was almost identical to that which I doodled on the mind map. This was fairly good, but I wanted to experiment further, so I done the same again, but this time I drew a circle in the centre of the negative space to depict a pupil. This was a fair design, but it wasn't too attractive, so I moved on again. But before I disregarded that concept, I tried it with larger negative space, and the pupil moved down slightly. This gave like a stare that was looking downwards to represent the company name iDive. Moving on to the next row, I extended that negative space in the centre of the eye, and I replaced the pupil with a water droplet. This did reflect the company name, but it wasn't an attractive concept. I moved on to the next, which was an immediate failure. I had the water droplet in the centre once again, but with a kind of outline to this design. I quickly moved on to the next attempt, which showed that curly kind of eye which I had drawn on the mind map. You'll see it has a pointed end at the right hand side, but curls inwards to form that pupil in the centre. I really like this concept, so I am going to explore this further in many more iterations. But before I do, I'm going to get some other concepts out the way first, just to get them out of my mind, knowing that I've tried and tested them. So moving on to the next, I just tried to refine this concept just to be sure that it was one that I did want to explore. So I made that pupil more circular in the centre and it gave a more pleasing shape, and it did confirm that this design was definitely a winner. So moving on to the row at the bottom, this first iteration on the left shows a kind of cat eye form. I also had the idea this could possibly be a fish shape, but then I quickly disregarded it. So I wanted to explore the shape of those goggles, whether they be skydiving goggles or the deep sea diving goggles, which resembled the VR headset shape. So I drew them out whilst maintaining the general shape of the eye. You'll see that I drew this with the nose bridge, which makes it look like glasses, or most importantly goggles. In the next iteration, I raised that nose bridge, but in turn it made the eye shape lose its prominence. In the very last sketch of this page, on bottom right, I introduced the water droplet again with a positive shape, which also doubled as a nose. I thought it was a fair idea initially, but having executed it, I'm going off on a tangent a little. So I'm going to continue to explore on the following page. So this represents the second page of sketches. You'll see at top left I've focused upon the curled eye shape once again. You'll see that in this version, instead of the eye curling into a circular pupil, it's pointed, almost like the Nike logo. It's a nice design, but it's a little too sharp overall. The next sketch sees the same idea, but with a tighter curl in the middle, with the biggest change being that the image is flipped horizontally. Still, this is a little bit too sharp in appearance, but I do prefer it being flipped in this manner so that the curl points left. This sketch shows the same concept, with the only difference being a rounded end to the right. This is somewhat of an improvement. But in the next iteration, which is rounded at both ends, shows that this is much better. I now realise with less sharp and more rounded ends, the overall image looks more subtle and could represent a wispy cloud, perfect to depict skydiving. What's more, the image looks like a wave too, an element which could be associated with deep sea diving. The idea was coming together, but it still needed refinements and exploration. Onto the middle row, this version on the left features the same pleasing rounded ends with a more tighter curl. This looks great, but I'm still pressing on to see what else is possible. In this version, I've rid it of the sharp point at the left of the shape and I'm making it rounded instead. This gives a pleasing and elegant flow and forms a more wispy spiral. This is very cloud-like and the wave is there too, marking another one for consideration. Exaggerating the idea of the cloud, I experimented in this version by making the end at the right flare outwards to give a plump kind of substance. Consequently, the eye concept is lost, however, so this is discounted. Just to see how the new idea with the rounded ends worked the other way around, to satisfy my curiosity, I developed a version flipped horizontally with a slightly tighter curl. This confirmed to me, however, that the original's better, with the inner curl pointing to the left, since it brings out the eye concept more. So onto the bottom row, the first on the left takes that rounded wispy form and sees a tighter curl. The curl is a little bit too close to the tail of the shape up top, so this wasn't an improvement. Next, I experiment with the flared end again, coupled with the rounded centre curl. Again, this brings out the idea of a cloud, but the eye concept is lost a little, since an eye shape or eyelid fades to a lateral point. To satisfy my curiosity before focusing on the previously approved versions, I exaggerated the cloud concept completely by inflating both ends. As expected, however, the eye was completely lost, even if it did resemble a cloud more. In the last sketch on the page, I reintroduced the point on the left. Coupled with the bulbous end to the right, it looked like a mix of two clashing ideas, eye and cloud stroke wave, with no happy compromise. I reached some pleasing solutions on this page, however, which I marked with an asterisk, but again I pressed on to see what potential lies ahead. This represents the last page of sketches. Keen to emphasise the eye concept a bit more, in this version at top left, I've reverted back to introducing the point to the left of the shape, rather than just having an overall simple curl. Although it's not apparent, there's a slight roundedness given to this point, since I still want the shape to flow. In the next sketch, I've extended the curl towards the right, so that the figurative pupil sits in the centre. As a result, this takes away from the character of the eye. The previous version, looking left as we see it, gives a much better feel. In the next iteration, to satisfy my curiosity again, I've thinned out the entire shape. This makes it lose its substance as a figurative fluffy cloud or thick wave. For the same reason of curiosity, in the next sketch, I created a version which has straight parts in the curl. This spoils the general flow, and the feel of the wave and the cloud are lost. Onto the bottom row in the sketch on the left, I redraw the original which I have at top left, but I introduce a shape at the bottom right. This shape was meant to stand as a figurative light shining in an eyeball, but this isn't apparent or even subtle, and only adds needless complexity to the design. In this sketch, favouring the version at top left again, I flipped it to satisfy curiosity to no avail. I drew it slightly off, admittedly, but it was enough to confirm that the original, with the curl pointing left, is definitely the way to go. In this iteration, I went off on a tangent and introduced the flare again with a slightly odd shape to it. The overall shape took on the form of a shell and all meaning was lost. I disregarded this to work on what was to become the last sketch. In this last sketch, I took the favoured version at top left once again and introduced a circle to act as a pupil in the centre of the eye. I needed to see what this looked like before I concluded, and I concluded that it looked better without. So now the moment of truth, to choose a version to take through to the refinement sketching stage. The version I like is the one I've mentioned continuously, and it's the one at top left. There's a catch, however, since there's another version that I'm considering. I'm completely undecided as to whether I want to emphasise the eye concept with the point at the left and compromise the flow of the cloud and wave, or if I want to opt for the version on the previous page which has the rounded part instead of the point, forming a flowing spiral and giving greater feel to the cloud and wave. So I'm going to take this symbol through the refinement sketching stage and I'm going to draw in a rounded part on the same drawing. That way I can develop both of the versions in the software from the same sketch, and both will be identical apart from those mentioned areas. Ultimately, I want to see how both of these versions look against text and how well they stand within a completed logo design. Here I am in the stage of the refinement sketch. To develop the refinement sketch of the chosen sketch symbol, I isolated and enlarged the scanned sketch in Illustrator and then printed it out. This gave me an image with pixelated thick lines, but an image which I could work from to sketch a version with thin and crisp lines. I used a layout pad with 45 grams per meter squared paper. This is quite thin paper, so I could easily trace the printout beneath. Placing the printed image beneath the page, I used a ruler to define the horizontal and vertical points. I then analysed the image to see where I could draw simple circles. Once identified, I drew the circles in with a compass. Next, I tackled all the other curves using a French curve. The French curve is rotated, and the best, most suitable curve is found for each part of the symbol, and it's then drawn in. After which time I made some freehand adjustments to make all the curves match the printout more precisely. I adjusted the tightness of the inner curl or wave, and I extended both of the rounded ends so they were a little bit more pointed. Finally, I made the introduction of the curve on the left, which forms the spiral version. This gave me two slightly different symbols within the same sketch. This allows me to use one sketch to develop two symbols in the software. I'll then see how each symbol performs when they're married with text in a completed logo design. And with that, the refinement sketch was complete, ready to be placed into the software to trace to develop the digital versions. So here we are in Adobe Illustrator. You'll see that I've started a new document here. Next thing I want to do is to place the refinement sketch. So I'm going to go to File, Place. I'm going to locate the file and I'm going to click Place. Now I'm going to drag this out onto the artboard like so. Make it a little bit larger. Now you'll see we have speckles, the odd speckle and dot around this sketch, which I imagine to be the texture of the paper. I want to just focus on this part of the sketch without any distractions. So I'm going to grab the rectangle tool. I'm going to draw a rectangle over the top of the sketch. And with that rectangle still selected, I'm going to hold Shift to select the sketch. I'm going to go to Object, Clipping Mask and Make. So now all those speckles have gone and we just have the main part of the graphic here. With the graphic selected, I'm going to go to the Properties panel. I'm going to bring the opacity slider down to 40% so I can see the shapes that I place on top of the sketch. Next, with the sketch selected, I'm going to go to the Layers panel. I'm going to double click Layer 1. I'm going to rename this Sketch. Next to the eye symbol, I'm going to click into the box until the padlock appears. This denotes a lock so that the sketch won't move when I'm working on top of it. Now to work on top of the sketch, I need to add another layer. So at the bottom of the layers panel, I'm going to click Create New Layer. I'm going to call this Symbol, double clicking and typing in Symbol. There we have the two sketches. This one remains unlocked, obviously, because this is the layer we're working upon. Now, if you recall, I mentioned that I was keen on exploring two versions of this symbol, hence the lines here and here. The first version I'd like to explore is one that curls round like so, with the rounded shape at the left here. The next version I'd like to explore is the one with the rounded point on the left, which gives more emphasis upon the shape of an eye. So now is the time to analyse this symbol to see where we can make use of primitive shapes. Primitive shapes can save us a hell of a lot of time having to mess around in an attempt to make curves with the pen tool, and they can provide a more perfect result. In this symbol, which is solely made of curves, I'm going to analyse where I can place circles using the ellipse tool. The curves of a circle shape are naturally perfect, and so I want to make use of that perfect quality in my symbol. So looking at the shape of the symbol, as you recall in the sketching stage, we used a compass to draw a circle here and a circle here. I can also identify that a circle can be used here also. So we have this curve which makes use of a circle, this part inside the negative space, which will make use of a circle, we'll deduct that shape from this shape, and this part here will also benefit from that circle shape. I've essentially minimized my workload and rid of my concerns of having to develop curves manually in these areas. Now, those three areas aren't the only parts of this symbol that will benefit from the ellipse tool. We can also use it for the ends here and here. We'll draw our curves with the pen tool and we'll stop around the end points, around here and here, and we'll place in small circles and adjust them accordingly to create perfectly rounded ends to the swirl. So I'm going to use the ellipse tool to draw circles in these areas, and then I'm going to shape them to my needs, and then I'm going to use the pen tool to draw out the rest of the remaining curves. So now, having analysed the form of the sketch symbol, we can go ahead and use the ellipse tool to draw out circles in the mentioned positions. So selecting the ellipse tool and ensuring that a colour is selected, I'm going to use orange. I'm going to draw out the first circle around this area. So holding Shift to keep a perfect ratio of a circle, I'm going to pull this out and I'm going to go to the Properties panel. I'm going to bring the opacity down to around 40% so I can see the sketch beneath. And with a selection tool, I'm going to match this up as perfectly as possible to the sketch. And there we have the closest fit to the sketch. Now I'm going to copy this circle with Alt and Shift, dragging over a copy here, because it's already got the 40% opacity applied, so it's just a little bit more convenient than reaching for the ellipse tool again. Holding Shift to keep the proportion ratio of the circle, I'm going to enlarge this and drag it over to the sketch on the left hand side, like so. So there we have the two circles, the large one and the medium sized one. I'm going to drag over a copy again using Alt and Shift on the keyboard, holding Shift to keep the proportion, and I'm going to place the center one as close to the sketch as possible, just adjusting slightly, like so. Now I'm going to select this circle, I'm going to bring it to the back, going to arrange center back, because I want to use this and this circle here. With the one in the middle selected, I'm going to also hold Shift to select this one. In the Pathfinder beneath Shape Modes, I'm going to go to minus front, and that portion will be cut out of this circle here, as you see. So, moving on to the larger circle, you can see that it ends here and it starts creeping in to the actual body of the shape. So we want to cut off from here to around here, because it starts creeping into the shape here. So I can use the pen tool, put an anchor point here and an anchor point down here, and make this shape over here towards the right hand side, holding Shift and selecting that circle. In the Pathfinder panel beneath Shape Modes, I can go to minus front and it'll leave me with this here. You see, we also have this little bit that needs to be shaved off, so we can simply use the eraser and just do that. We'll be drawn with a pen tool around here, so we needn't worry about these parts. Let's go ahead and use the eraser to get rid of these points here. This part of the shape, which won't be used, and the end, because we'll be placing a circle there. Now, we're not going to go ahead and build this, because as you'll see, we have quite an awkward curve to mend here. We need to take the pen tool, and we need to ensure that this is perfect. That is to say that this shape on the left needs to seamlessly match up with this shape on the right. However, there's a much easier way we can combat this, and this is by using ovals instead of the initial circles. So let's go ahead and delete these shapes. Now, using the ellipse tool once again, bringing down to 40% opacity again, rather than draw a circle and leave a lot of this untouched, I'm going to drag out an oval instead. So you'll now see we've covered so much more surface area covering the sketch beneath. So no longer do we stop here and have to draw manually with the pen tool, we have the circle create our curve all the way up to this point. Let's go ahead and copy this oval with Alt and Shift and increase it in size, and let's match it up on the left hand side, ensuring that the path matches that of this circle beneath at this point. So as you'll see, we need to adjust the actual shape, moving it across ever so slightly with the keyboard arrows, like so. Now you'll see we not only have this curve flowing around at the bottom seamlessly, we also have it at the top going to a further extent. It no longer ends at this point. So it's the ovals which are going to prove priceless in this design. Copying again, I'm going to hold Shift to keep proportion, and I'm going to place it in the center. Again, we have all that surface area covered, so we needn't worry about filling in multiple gaps with curves. So with that done, I'm going to select the larger circle. I'm going to go to Object, Send to Back, so that I can select this circle in the center and this medium-sized circle. Holding Shift to select both. In the Pathfinder panel beneath Shape Modes, I'm going to select minus front, and this deducts that center piece from the medium-sized oval. Now, I'm just going to hide this shape, the large oval for now. I'm going to click the eye icon, and I'm going to work on this to get rid of the parts that are unnecessary. So analysing this, I can see that it starts to come out here. So the first point is around here, the first anchor point, and the next is going to be around this area. As mentioned, we're going to be putting small circles at either end of this swirly wave shape. And so that's where we're going to go across here. So using the pen tool, I'm going to click here. I'm going to go over here, do a point up there, and we're going to go here as mentioned. So I have this shape. With that shape still selected, I'm going to hold Shift and select the oval shape in the Pathfinder panel. I'm going to go to Shape Modes. Beneath that, I'm going to go to minus front, and I'm left with this shape. So in the Layers panel, let's switch on the large oval, like so. And you'll see that it starts to come into the shape at this point, and it starts to flow out of the sketch shape at this point. So with the pen tool, I'm going to click out here. I'm going to click here. And I'm going to create another shape. So with that shape selected, I'm going to select the oval beneath. Pathfinder panel beneath Shape Modes, I'm going to select minus front. So I'm left with this. So bringing up the opacity of both of these shapes back up to 100%, we can see them in all of their glory. We can observe that the path of both shapes at the bottom are aligned nicely. As such, each shape flows effectively into the next, giving the impression of a single curve. We'll be inspecting all joins and shapes later zoomed in, however, to attain absolute precision in those curves. So to review, with those simple steps taken, careful analysis of the shape, and wise use of simple tools, we were able to reduce the workload significantly, resulting close to perfection with no less than 50% of the entire symbol complete. This demonstrates brilliantly how thoughtful design can make the most intimidating of graphics a breeze to develop. So let's go about building the rest of the symbol. Before I do so, I'm going to merge these two shapes that we created previously, just so that we have a more simple, singular shape to work with. So, selecting those two shapes, holding Shift, selecting the first and the second, I'm going to go to the Pathfinder panel beneath Shape Modes, I'm going to click Unite. So now we have that simple, singular shape here. So next, I'm going to work across the top, and then through the bottom here. So with the pen tool selected, I'm going to click on the anchor point at the end of this path here. I'm going to go around like so. I'm going to click, I'm going to pull out to create this curve to match the sketch perfectly like so. With that done, I'm going to assign an opacity of around 30% so that I can see the sketch beneath. I'm going to click this anchor point. I'm going to click here on the line on the sketch, and I'm going to go around. Now, to create this curve, I need to click first on this part, what's called the ceiling or the floor, depending on which way you look at it. So I need to click here, pulling out, matching the sketch like so. Once I've done that, the next anchor point should be down here. So clicking here on the path, you'll see it turns pink. I'm going to pull out like so. And then I'm going to use this handle to adjust. This handle to adjust. Like so. Now you'll see it pulls out a bit here, but that's okay. We'll try and make adjustments later if need be. So let's turn that opacity up just to see how it looks like in all its glory. And this looks good. I want to ensure that this part here gets filled in. So with the pen tool, I'm just going to click back on that anchor point. I'm going to click down here and join there, like so. As I did before, I'm going to select this shape and the next shape holding shift. And I'm going to go to the Pathfinder panel beneath shape modes. I'm going to click unite. So again, we have that singular shape to work with. So now for the ends here and here, as mentioned previously, we're going to put circles here. So with the ellipse tool selected, I'm going to go in with the magnifying glass, the zoom, and I'm going to work on this portion first. So I'm going to pull out again a circle, and I'm going to position it carefully so that it looks like a cap that's been naturally drawn around with the pen tool. Now there we have it. There's a slight little part here which needs filling in, which I'll do later. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this circle that I've just created. I'm going to copy this with Alt and Shift. I'm going to drag it across to see if it'll fit in here, which it will, which is ideal for consistency. So let's zoom in and see how this is fitting. So let's adjust this very slightly, just so that it looks like an end cap as mentioned before, as if it's been drawn around with the pen tool. And there we have the perfect fit. So let's zoom out. And I'm happy with that. Now to finish, I'm going to select all shapes by pulling out, dragging across all. I'm going to go to the Pathfinder panel beneath shape modes. I'm going to click that unite button again. So let's turn off the sketch by going to the visibility in the layers panel, clicking the eye, and this is the resulting shape. Now as mentioned, there will be a couple of glitches that need to be rectified, and we can also go about improving the curves. So we'll do that in the next stage. So let's go in and clean up those glitches and curves. So the first thing I see here is some sort of fragment down here. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that by using the direct selection tool, dragging over it and pressing delete on the keyboard. Next, I'm going to zoom out and then in. Now all I need to do is use the delete anchor point tool here, go into this recess and click like so. I'm going to review this, ask myself, is this perfect? Which it isn't. We've still got some form of indent down here. So with the direct selection tool, that's the white arrow up here, I'm going to drag over like so to form a square. And I'm going to pull this out until it's a pleasing shape. You'll see that it now flows round nicely. So zooming out, I'm going to look for the next glitch or curve that doesn't look correct. Now, it's going to be this one here. This is prominent. So clicking upon the symbol with the direct selection tool, I can clearly see that there's an anchor point here, which is entirely unnecessary. It's actually knocking the curve out of shape. All that's necessary is this anchor point down here and this anchor point here to define this curve. And so I'm going to go ahead and delete this anchor point. Now I need to readjust. So with the direct selection tool still selected, I'm going to pull this handle across until I get a nice flowing curve between this segment and this segment, which I've managed to achieve. So zooming out, I'm going to look for the next problem. Now I can see a problem down here with this curve. So I'm going to zoom in again. With the direct selection tool, I'm going to select the symbol as a whole. And I can see again, there's an unnecessary anchor point in the middle here. All that's necessary is this anchor point and this one here to define this curve. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this anchor point in the middle, and I'm going to readjust in accordance with the sketch. So I'm going to switch the sketch back on with the direct selection tool. I'm going to drag this across this handle. And I'm going to ensure that it's a nice flowing curve with this segment. So let's switch off the sketch. Now we've matched up the sketch as close as possible, but some adjustment is necessary to achieve that flow. And there we have it. We have a nice flow between the segment above and the segment below, which in turn gives a nice flowing feel to the swoosh as a whole. So again, I'm going to analyze the symbol to see if there's anything left that I need to rectify. I'm going to zoom in places. I'm going to check out this at the bottom. I would like to fix this as a slight indentation. So again, with the direct selection tool, I'm going to drag out that square and I'm going to drag this anchor point. And I'm happy with that. So zooming out, let's check out this end. Now we've got a glitch down here. So clicking upon the symbol, I'm going to use delete anchor point, removing that, turning on the sketch. We've went off course a little bit here, but it doesn't matter. It's only short. It's shortened at the point. And there we have it. That's fixed. I'm going to turn the sketch back off. Let's just make that again. Happy with that. Zooming out. Got a slight indentation here. Direct selection tool. Pulling out that square. And pulling out here. And I'm happy with that one. Checking out all the curves which appear to be correct. So let's switch on the sketch. As you'll see, we have went off course ever so slightly down here, but arguably that was necessary to achieve the flow of that curve. We've also fell short at the end, and this is because we used a large circle as opposed to a smaller one to be consistent with the other end, which was more substantial. So you'll see we do have very, very minor deviations when we enter the software, but we do strive to follow the sketch as closely as possible. And so with that process covered, this renders a complete and perfect symbol representing a cloud, a rolling wave, and an eye for the company iDive. So let's not forget that I was keen on exploring an alternative version of this symbol. On the left of the sketch, you can see a protrusion which emphasises the concept of an eye. Consequently, however, this detracts from the concepts of a wave and cloud. Nonetheless, curiosity has the better of me, and so I'm going to put this together since it's a very simple job and will take no time at all. Okay, this doesn't have to be perfect. I will try and perfect it if I like the concept, if I choose it over the other. So let's get started. At first, I'm going to use the ellipse tool. I'm going to draw out a circle. It's just going to give that very slight curve. So now I'm going to link these up, circle to the body of the eye, ensuring that Smart Guides is switched on. So using the pen tool, just going to click on the path of that circle, and I'm going to go to the path of the main body, the main shape. And I'm going to pull a shape out. I'm going to come down here, clicking on the path again, and I'm going to join the path of that circle again, pulling downwards, or rather going upwards with the mouse so that I get a downwards curve. And with that done, that marks that complete. I'm going to select all shapes. I'm going to go to the Pathfinder, beneath shape modes, I'm going to select Unite. And so let's switch off the sketch. This represents the second version. As you'll see, it's a bit ropey up here, the curve, but the shape is there for me to cast judgment. And on that note, I must say, having manifested this symbol digitally, I'm not keen on exploring it further. The reason being is that although the eye concept is emphasised, I consequently lose the other two concepts, wave and cloud. As such, there isn't a worthwhile compromise here, only a sacrifice. And so I'll be proceeding henceforth with my initial rounded version, which encompasses all of the three concepts equally. It's always a great idea to experiment and innovate. Sometimes it proves fruitful, whereas at other times we might find that our initial ideas are more favourable. We might even go back to the drawing board. In this case, I have no doubt that my initial concept will serve the project so much better. So now comes the part where we marry our carefully developed symbol with text. Here you'll see I've carefully selected 10 fonts which caught my eye on the font website. I'm now going to proceed to whittle down to a final decision by briefly reviewing each. You'll see the font styles reflect the client's preference stated in the questionnaire. You'll see that the symbol's been placed in accordance with the layout preferences also stated. So jumping right in and focusing on number 1. This font is a playful sans serif. It features curved points to some of the ends of the characters, and the eye has a quirky curl. I feel this is perhaps a little bit too decorative for this application, though it does manage to successfully convey the feel and flow of water and the wispiness of clouds. With that point considered, the font does manage to meld very nicely with the symbol. Next we see number 2. As you can see, this is a bold font. It doesn't carry the element of wispiness to match the symbol as the previous font. Instead, it holds a quality which is more aggressive, carrying a feel of movement in its italicism. This font pushes the feel of energy to a considerable extent. Number 3 sees a futuristic boxy style font with jagged features. This font is very rigid, and so we see a clash against the flow of the symbol. Whilst futuristic is a quality we're shooting for the aforementioned reason, I know this is a font that I'll disregard. Number 4 carries a soft, rounded style. This form melds well with the symbol, but consequently lacks movement and energy. Whilst there could be remedied, there's also obscure parts of some characters, such as the top of the D, which features a subtle and arguably unnecessary dip at the top. Though it's perfectly legible, overall this font is a little bit too static for the intended application. Number 5 carries a hardcore extreme sports feel. As a bold italic font, it boasts a quality of drive, excitement and energy, whilst depicting a subtle element of technology. The form of this font isn't very original, however, and there are some awkward looking characters which lack attractiveness. The Y in particular, whilst lending to the flow and direction of the figurative movement, isn't aesthetically pleasing, at least to my eyes. I feel overall that this font is perhaps too extreme for this particular application. So continuing with our review of the fonts, let's dive straight in and take a look at the next column. Number 6 sees a clean and highly legible font. This bold font is relatively formal, with the exception of the D in this text line, which is curved at the bottom. The E's also have a unique style, being a little bit compressed at the top. This is relatively attractive, but I'm not sure it's suitable for this application. In number 7, we see a well-crafted font. It has a good aesthetic appeal, with characters taking on a rounded box form. This look of font tends to carry a feel of technology quite well too. The form of this font, however, possibly goes against the grain of the form of the symbol, which is a more of a rounded shape. So number 8 is a simple sans serif font, with styling to the D in this text line. This font looks generally formal, but its merit is that it's highly legible. It doesn't ring bells nor blow whistles, but it's an effective, simple style. In number 9, we see a font which boasts a high impact quality. It's bold and prominent, and its weight matches the symbol very well at this size. There's special styling given to the Y in this case, with a small section removed from the tail. This font is reminiscent of a black or extra heavy Myriad font. Myriad is a common Adobe font, so in the interest of branding effectively, it's probably one I'm going to disregard. Reaching for the final font, which is number 10, this exuberates technology. Characters are subtly round in their form with blunt points. We can see a nod given to the 7-segment LED display that we see on alarm clocks. With the expansive quality of technology aside, this font lacks any kind of figurative movement or excitement. As such, it doesn't convey the exhilaration of skydiving nor scuba diving. So that completes the review of each one of the 10 fonts that I selected. Now is the time to consider all those pros and cons raised and decide upon a final font to marry with the symbol. So having reviewed each font, I've briefly identified the aesthetic appeal of each, or lack of. Having considered every one of the 10 fonts herein, I've whittled down and reached a conclusion. Whilst I really favoured the technological look of number 10, as mentioned it was far too static for the application and lacked any kind of excitement. With that point aside, zooming in, I found this font to be very low quality. That's to say that each character has been drawn very roughly. This would prompt an entire rebuild from scratch of every character. Whilst I'm entirely willing to do that, the initial factor would render this a pointless feat. So, the number 1 favoured font which I've chosen is number 2. It's bold, dominant, it has an aesthetically appealing form, it's got movement in its italicism, and it carries an effective balance between technology and sport. What's more, the form and weight of the characters make this font meld beautifully with the symbol. So the next stage to make this type look even more attractive is to go through the kerning process. So now it's time for the kerning. Here you'll see I've placed the font on the artboard at a reasonably large size, just so I can see the minor details and the minor shifts as I make the adjustments. So let's begin. First of all, I'm going to take a copy of this with Alt and Shift. I'm going to scroll down, just moving this down. With that still selected, I'm going to go to Type, Create Outlines. So each character is now a literal shape. Ungrouping these shapes, I'm going to go to Object, Ungroup, so I can move each independently. So analysing this, I can see that there's a difference between this space here and this space here. Now, I think I'm going to use this as the basis of judgment. So I'm going to move this across to the left. I'm using the keyboard cursor, so I'm pressing the left arrow just to move this across. And again, I'm trying to match the spacing of these two characters here. So another press of that key, I think that's it. I'm happy with this space here, which should match this near enough. Maybe just a click over to the right hand side. So there selected D, I, V and E and press the right keyboard cursor button. So next I can see there's a gap here obviously, but there's too much of a tight gap here. So I'm going to select the V and the E and I'm going to go right like so, just to match up. Not exactly the same width as this because we've got a load of space down here. I just want to provide a little bit more space there to that V, and I think that's adequate enough. This space here should match the space here and here. So I'm going to select this E and I'm going to use the right cursor on the keyboard to click that across. Like so. And I think that marks that complete. I'm just going to sit back and analyze that. And I'm happy with that. One last change, I think I'm going to select all of these characters and move them across, just maybe one touch on the keyboard there to the right, and one more perhaps, like so. Now we'll go back. And I'm happy with that. So that marks completion of the kerning, so the text is now ready to be married with the symbol. So now comes the part where we marry our carefully developed symbol with text. Here you'll see I've carefully selected 10 fonts which caught my eye on the font website. I'm now going to proceed to whittle down to a final decision by briefly reviewing each. You'll see the font styles reflect the client's preference stated in the questionnaire. You'll see that the symbol's been placed in accordance with the layout preferences also stated. So jumping right in and focusing on number 1. This font is a playful sans serif. It features curved points to some of the ends of the characters, and the eye has a quirky curl. I feel this is perhaps a little bit too decorative for this application, though it does manage to successfully convey the feel and flow of water and the wispiness of clouds. With that point considered, the font does manage to meld very nicely with the symbol. Next we see number 2. As you can see, this is a bold font. It doesn't carry the element of wispiness to match the symbol as the previous font. Instead, it holds a quality which is more aggressive, carrying a feel of movement in its italicism. This font pushes the feel of energy to a considerable extent. Number 3 sees a futuristic boxy style font with jagged features. This font is very rigid, and so we see a clash against the flow of the symbol. Whilst futuristic is a quality we're shooting for the aforementioned reason, I know this is a font that I'll disregard. Number 4 carries a soft, rounded style. This form melds well with the symbol, but consequently lacks movement and energy. Whilst there could be remedied, there's also obscure parts of some characters, such as the top of the D, which features a subtle and arguably unnecessary dip at the top. Though it's perfectly legible, overall this font is a little bit too static for the intended application. Number 5 carries a hardcore extreme sports feel. As a bold italic font, it boasts a quality of drive, excitement and energy, whilst depicting a subtle element of technology. The form of this font isn't very original, however, and there are some awkward looking characters which lack attractiveness. The Y in particular, whilst lending to the flow and direction of the figurative movement, isn't aesthetically pleasing, at least to my eyes. I feel overall, so here we have the 12 instances of the text paired with the symbol. So analysing the top row, due to the tail of the symbol, the shape appears to be pushed out to the left hand side. The result is a load of white space between the curl and the beginning of the text. The symbol could hypothetically be flipped horizontally, but this defeats the purpose of my objective of how I want the symbol to look. What's more, the eye shape seems to be lost somewhat when the symbol's flipped horizontally. For this reason, I'm going to disregard all logos in this line with the symbol to the left. So reviewing the second line down, I very much like the symbol in this position. It sits neatly at the side and above the E and flows fluidly into the shape of the Y. Therefore, both elements, text and symbol, though separate elements, meld into a concise and tidy unit. This would constitute as an incorporated logo. This suggests that both the text and symbol should be treated as one. We cannot distinguish each by a horizontal nor vertical line. Nonetheless, they can be separated should the application demand it. Though the middle version symbol reflects the thickness of the font the best, I'd probably favour the first one since I want some degree of emphasis on the symbol. So on to the third line. This is a more typical logo layout which doesn't really take the form of the elements into consideration. That's to say that nothing quite flows in a manner like the previous row of logos. The symbol is simply placed above the text. With that said, in the first instance here, the curl of the symbol is seated nicely before the stem of the D. This layout, perhaps with the exception of the first, gives a clear distinction between symbol and text. We can observe this since each could be divided with a horizontal line. This is true of the middle and right versions. Finally, the bottom line. Using the negative space within the curl of the symbol as the tittle of the eye, I feel is a great idea. The consequence, however, is that the carefully crafted symbol doesn't stand as prominent as I'd like. Looking at the first on the left, this version features the symbol at a small size. This allows the round negative space to sit in a suitable position above the stem of the eye, even if the bulk of the symbol is thinner than the text here. In the middle iteration, the symbol is a perfect average thickness in relation to the text, but we see that its size takes that negative space tittle over to the right hand side. On the version on the right, the symbol has perhaps been enlarged too much, since it's overly dominant, being much thicker than the text, and the feel of the tittle over the eye is completely lost since it's too far right. So to conclude, with all of those logos reviewed, having weighed up the pros and cons, I've reached a final decision. The logo which I've chosen as the final for iDive is middle bottom here. I feel the symbol works in great harmony with the text and brings yet another function and meaning to the symbol. So we have a wispy cloud, a rolling wave, an eye, and the tittle of the eye character. I feel everything has come together and grown in its effectiveness. So herein marks the final logo design for iDive, ready for colouring. So here I've opened a new Illustrator document and I've created 10 instances of the logo in preparation for colouring. In the questionnaire, the client has stipulated that they would like sky blue as their preferred colour. They've also stated that they would like a maximum of only 2 colours in their logo design. Although the text and symbol are meant to function as a concise and singular unit in this design, I would like to differentiate between the two to some degree to make each shine on their own merit. As such, I'm going to colour each of them a different tone of sky blue. I'm going to choose 2 colours for the logos in the left hand side column. Then I'm going to reverse those colours for the versions on the right hand side. That is to say, I might have dark text on the left with a lighter symbol, and on the right hand side I might have a light text coupled with a darker symbol. The likelihood is I'll settle for a version which has darker text for the sake of increased legibility, but nonetheless I'm going to experiment to see what my options are. So let's proceed and colour the first logo at top left. So selecting all with the selection tool, dragging across, I'm going to go to the colour panel and I'm going to select a colour from the CMYK spectrum here. Obviously I'm going to select a sky blue. So just using this eyedropper until I find a suitable sky blue colour. I'm going to bring this up in blue away from turquoise just by using the cyan slider up top here. And I'm happy with this colour as a sky blue. Next, using the direct selection tool, I'm going to select the symbol and on the cyan slider again, I'm going to bring this down so that it's a lighter tone of that sky blue. and I think that stands as a quality option. I'm pleased with those two colours. Now with the selection tool, I'm going to drag over the next on the right hand side, and I'm going to use the eyedropper tool, and I'm going to select the symbol colour. With the direct selection tool, I'm going to select the symbol, and I'm going to use the eyedropper tool to match the text. So here you'll see we have a reverse version of the one on the left. Lighter text with the darker symbol. So let's move on to the next. With the selection tool, selecting all, I'm going to move to the CMYK spectrum once again in the colour palette, and I'm going to select another sky blue colour. Notice how I just don't copy off the last using the eyedropper tool. I do go back to the CMYK spectrum to get a unique colour. So I'm happy with that. This is a different tone from the last. It's less turquoise. So with the direct selection tool, selecting that symbol once again, I'm going to bring this down with the cyan slider and the magenta just to get a lighter tone for the symbol. So I'm going to select this version on the right hand side. I'm going to use the eyedropper tool again. I'm going to match that up with the symbol. I'm going to select the symbol only on this version, and with the eyedropper tool I'm going to match to the text. So here we have a version again, lighter text, darker symbol, reverse of this version on the left. So on to the next. Let's go to the spectrum once again, and let's find ourselves a nice sky blue colour. Like so. Here you'll see it differs from the previous again. Direct selection tool. I'm going to bring down that cyan and that magenta to make a lighter symbol. Moving on to the one on the right, eyedropper tool, I'm going to match it up to the symbol, and I'm going to select the symbol, eyedropper tool, match to the text. So we have a reverse version of this version on the left. Moving on to the next, let's grab ourselves another unique sky blue colour from the CMYK spectrum. Trying to avoid being too similar to previous. And I'll bring that down on the magenta. And I'll bring up the cyan just a little bit on that slider. That's quite a dark sky blue. Nonetheless, it does resemble the sky. So, selecting the symbol, I'm going to use those sliders again, the magenta and the cyan, just to bring down that tone of symbol there. I'm happy with that. Selecting the version on the right hand side, using the eyedropper tool, matching this to the symbol, and selecting the symbol of this version, I'm going to match the text so we have that dark symbol version. You see, these are perhaps a bit too light to be legible, but they are options to consider nonetheless. So moving on to the bottom left, again I'm going to go with that CMYK spectrum and pick out a nice sky blue colour that differs from the rest. And let's just bring that up so it's a little bit darker. Happy with that. With the direct selection tool, let's select that symbol, bring down the lightness. With the magenta, the cyan. Again, there isn't much difference between those two colours, so I have to bring it down in lightness a little bit more. Like that, that'll do. So moving on to the right hand side version with the eyedropper tool, match the symbol again and select the symbol alone and match the text. So here we have 10 unique options, or we have 5 options with the colours reversed on the right hand side, depending on which way you want to look at it. But all in all, we do essentially have 10 options to consider here. So I'm going to take a look at these, I'm going to consider the pros and cons of each, and I'm going to reach a final decision to establish the final logo design for iDive. So let's briefly review each of the sky blue colour options. Sky blue isn't actually a concrete colour, since as you'll appreciate, the sky can be a whole array of different colour blues. In essence, sky blue is generally regarded as a light blue, but can take on the tone of a darker blue while still holding a fresh, vibrant quality. Sky blue colours are coincidentally also reflective of colours of the sea, particularly tropical seas. This naturally ties in nicely with this industry since the company specialises in skydiving and deep sea diving virtual reality simulations. So starting with the top left, though we're still in the realm of sky blue, the text in this instant takes on a turquoise tone and the symbol a light teal. With this in mind, these colours lend towards the sea more so than they do the colours of the sky. The symbol therefore carries a feel of a wave, and the cloud double meaning is perhaps lost a little. The version on the right emphasises this feel to a greater extent, since more surface area, the text, employs a colour which is more typical of the sea. The text is also very light, which detracts from legibility. In the second logo down, we see two blues, which serve as a sensible happy medium. That's to say that both colours here would be suited to both sky and sea. The blue used in the text is a prominent dark colour without being too dark a shade, which veers away from the colour of the sea or sky. The symbol stands distinguished as a lighter shade, but at a tone which is also prominent, capturing the same feel. The alternative version on the right works reasonably well, though the bulk of logo, the text, again, I feel should be the more prominent aspect in the design. In the third logo down, we see some lighter, fresher blues. These blues reflect the colour of a summer's sky very well. The tone of sea would suggest it to be tropical, which is a typical location for deep sea diving. There could probably be a greater difference in colour between the text and symbol here, I feel. The alternative version on the right sees the text displayed in the light blue, which is definitely too light for effective legibility. Onto the fourth logo down, we see the darkest blue of the set here used for the text. Whilst this blue is typical of the sea, it's perhaps veering away too much from the typical colour of the sky. Therefore, the skydiving feel tends to be lost a little. The symbol contrasts well, however, but the version on the right with the colours flipped sees the text displayed at a colour which is too light to be fully legible. The symbol is also a bit bold in colour to stand as a wispy, airy cloud. In the final logo at the bottom, we break into a turquoise again for the text. This colour gives a feel of a tropical sea, and I feel the depiction of the sky colour is lost. Whilst it's possible for the sky to be this colour, it's more likely we'll see it as a colour which is more blue. The version on the right actually works better, since the majority of the logo is a blue, which serves to stand for both sea and sky. Again, the text is a little bit too light, however, to stand prominent as a brand. So with the pros and cons of all these options considered, I've reached a final decision. And the version which I've chosen is the second one down on the left. It's bold in colour and serves each aspect of the business well, skydiving and deep sea diving. The text stands out brilliantly and the symbol colour reflects the light and airy feel which I'm aiming for to depict a cloud, a wave and an eye. And so here stands the final completed logo design for iDive. So let's retrace the steps involved in the development of the iDive logo. As standard, we began with the completed client questionnaire. As shown in question 1, iDive is the name of the company, and the answer to question 4 reveals that the business sector is virtual reality, with the answer to question 5 elaborating that the business involves providing virtual reality headsets and software for the purposes of skydiving and deep sea diving safety. The client stipulates that they favour the following layouts: icon above text, icon at the side of the text, and icon and text incorporated. They've stated that they would specifically like a symbol depicting the VR experience with a sky and or sea element. And so with this information acquired, we go on to build the mood board. The mood board, comprising a total of 34 images in this case, was compiled in an Illustrator document using Google Images as the source. Amongst the images I feature competitor logos, including those competitors stated in the client questionnaire, as well as generic images pertaining to the virtual reality industry. I also feature a range of virtual reality headset products manufactured by the competitor businesses, as well as their company logos, to gain an insight into their style. It was my aim to have my logo fit into the industry whilst being unique in its form, unlike any other brand which is already established. Next, I undertook the process of developing a mind map. Writing down the company name and associated terms relating to the industry in the centre of a piece of paper, I used a pencil to branch off into word associations and ideas. These concepts were plucked fresh from my mind, as well as using the mood board too for inspiration. The mind map would serve as the bridge between mood board and the sketching stage. It was my intention to finish the mind map stage with a concept in mind ready to carry through to the sketching stage. Noting down concepts such as water, waves, curl, cloud and eye, I honed into an attractive idea at the top of the page which seen an eye shape take on the form of a wave and a wispy cloud. And so with this idea secured, I headed into the sketching stage to experiment with the idea. Before specifically exploring the idea that I expressed in the mind mapping stage, I wanted to try out a few other ideas I had in mind first. A VR headset / goggles shape appeared in the mind map too, and it occurred to me that I could possibly make this shape into an eye to give a double meaning. After disposing of that idea, however, I returned to my original intention of experimenting with the eye / wave / cloud shape. And so I dedicated time to develop a further 20 iterations based upon this idea. I experimented with different forms, from rounded, flared-ended versions to ones with tight curls, to try and emphasise the feel of a cloud. However, I arrived at a pleasing solution which allowed the concept of an eye, wave and cloud to shine in a manner that was equally balanced. Reconsidering, however, I was torn between a version which featured a curve to the left and one which featured a rounded point to give further emphasis to the eye concept. And so I developed a carefully drawn refinement sketch which featured both. It was this precise drawing which I place and trace in the software. After analysing the form of the symbol in the software, I observed where I could place primitive shapes for more perfect curves. In this case, I analysed where I could place ovals using the ellipse tool. Once these filled ovals were placed, I deducted the unnecessary parts and completed the rest of the symbol shape with the pen tool, matching the sketch beneath as close to as possible. Before committing to this version of the symbol, I did try out the alternative version which looked more like an eye by tracing the alternative version of the sketch. As suspected, however, I didn't favour this version, since consequently I lost the feel of the wave and cloud, so I quickly disregarded this. Armed with my newly developed perfected symbol, I was ready to marry it with a suitable font. After selecting a range of fonts which I favoured from the Font Foundry website, I analysed each with the symbol applied and weighed up the pros and the cons. I observed how well the text and symbol paired with each other, considering the weight and overall design form. I finally whittled down to my favoured font which I found more suitable for the application, with a pleasant balance between technology and sport. What's more, after experimenting with various layouts, I found the ultimate position for the symbol. With the title of the I character deleted, I could have the symbol stand above with the rounded negative space of the symbol standing in its place. This means the symbol had taken on a fourth meaning. It was evolving as a highly dynamic piece. After some slight kerning to give equal aesthetic space between each character, the logo was then ready to be graced with colour. Reflecting the client's preferences of colour in the questionnaire, an array of sky blues were selected for 10 instances of the logo. These blues were picked out from the CMYK spectrum in the colour panel in Illustrator. My aim was to select tones of blue which would depict both the colour of the sky and the colour of the sea. I also wanted the symbol to hold that same quality, but also give hint to the colour of the sky, since one of its meanings is to depict a cloud, as well as a wave and an eye. Even though the range of sky blues are generally soft colours, it was important that the text stood out enough to be legible, especially from a distance. Upon scrutinising each and every colour option, I finally reached a decision. With its bold yet airy blue and its lighter sky blue which still manages to capture the feel of water, this represents the final selection. And so here we have it, a logo designed for a company specialising in skydiving and deep sea diving virtual reality experiences, incorporating a symbol with multiple apt meanings. We have an eye, we have a wave, both in the positive and negative space, a wispy cloud, we perhaps even have the trail of a plane or the downward fall of a skydiver. And lastly, the symbol stands as the tittle of the eye. So there it is, the final logo design solution for iDive. Thanks for your interest in taking this logo design activity. Please see the client questionnaire in the resources. Submit screenshots of your work and I'll take the time to provide one-on-one critique. Please remember to include all stages of planning: mood board, mind map, rough sketches and refinement sketch. I look forward to connecting with you to see your creative efforts. Thanks for your interest in taking this logo design activity. Please see the client questionnaire in the resources. Submit screenshots of your work and I'll take the time to provide one-on-one critique. Please remember to include all stages of planning: mood board, mind map, rough sketches and refinement sketch. I look forward to connecting with you to see your creative efforts. Here we have the mood board for the True Tone amplification project, which I've constructed in Illustrator using pictures which I've extracted from Google Images. I'll be using this mood board as inspiration for ideas in the mind mapping process, and I'll be referencing it throughout the project to obtain ideas as I work. In particular, I'll be noting the style of current brands on the market, and I'll be using them as a basis of what I might favour when developing my design, and of course what I might avoid. The questionnaire too will be close at hand so that I can reference the client's preferences. So I've arranged the mood board in a rough but comprehensible manner. I have the brands of amplifiers situated towards the left hand side, including Marshall, Laney, Blackstar, Orange, Vox, Hughes and Kettner and Hayden, to name a few. Towards the middle right I've introduced brands of guitar. I've included electric guitar brands, bass brands and acoustic guitar brands including PRS, Martin, Tanglewood, Crafter and Cordoba. Towards the bottom I've included pictures of each type of guitar which the client's product is designed for, to get a feel of the overall picture and purpose. Bottom right I have examples of combo amplifiers, cabinets and heads. This gives me a rough idea of how logos look on similar products. Top right I have Bang & Olufsen logos and a few pictures of their products and branding style. The client stipulated that they wished for True Tone to be the Bang & Olufsen of amplifiers, and so I've referenced the unique upmarket style of this company to consider during the planning process. So that represents the mood board for this project. and it's this I'll be using to segue into the mind mapping process, where it will assist in giving me direction for a unique brand for true tone amplification. Using the mood board for inspiration and ideas, I've constructed the mind map for true tone amplification. I've noted down the company name in the centre of the page. I've written down the tagline too, which also describes the business. I've circled these and branched off from each with lines in a rough direction. Words and ideas associated with the word true feature on the left. Words and ideas which remind me of tone are noted down on the right, and things which remind me of amplification feature at the bottom of the mind map. Throughout the process, I reference the mood board. The mood board is particularly useful for ideas for fonts and ways to use them to depict certain qualities of the company. Contents of the mood board can often tie in nicely with thoughts expressed in the mind map. To analyse in specific detail, I've explored the ways to depict the quality of true, and I've branched into the qualities of nobility, luxury, and the appearance of being bold by means of using a bold font. I've also explored the idea of a crown to portray these qualities whilst appearing prestigious. I've given a reference to the elegant font used in the Bang & Olufsen branding too. The quality of being dependable by production of sturdy, trustworthy equipment has also been explored with the idea of using a cliff face which can endure wear and tear. To the right, I've explored ideas in the instrument and the act of performing. I've considered the shape of the instrument, making note of the sleek curves of the guitars. I've referenced musical notes, an eighth note in particular, which could later prove to be very useful for the logo design concept. At the bottom, ideas of sound waves have been explored together with a shape which represents the aforementioned cliff. The ability to dial in and shape sound to one's specific preference has also been hinted at. I've explored the shape of the ear, and it's here where I've made a valuable association. I've discovered that an ear could possibly be made to look like a stylized eighth note as seen at top right, and vice versa. I've highlighted these doodles with an asterisk. It's this concept which I'll be exploring in the rough sketching stage, and with that I'm fully satisfied of having concluded with a solid design concept for true tone amplification. Following from the concept which I concluded with in the mind mapping process, I began the first stage of rough sketching. To recap, the concept is a musical eighth note fashioned into an abstract ear, or vice versa. So with a mind map at hand for reference, I drew out the raw form eighth note shape, as you see in sketch number 1. This allowed me to reference it in each iteration so that I didn't deviate into complete abstraction. I don't want the note to be instantly recognisable by any means, or the ear if anyone sees the note firsthand. It could even be considered as hidden, but I want it to be visible at least if it's pointed out. That's the beauty of hidden meaning logos. You can see the logo several times, and only after concentrated study or someone bringing it to our attention does the concept or concepts become apparent. In each instance, I make notes for my personal use beneath each sketch, usually describing what change I've made from the previous iteration, sometimes with an added opinion. The designs worthy of my attention are those which I mark with an asterisk. This shows that I'm happy with the changes made to the design. Analysing the specific sketches further, number 2 sees a rounded, more playful and flowing version of the musical note, similar to the concept which I doodled in the mind mapping process. In sketch number 3, I make the top and bottom parts more curly and rounded, respectively, though as my comments state, I lost the form of the musical note as a result. Sketch number 4 sees more pleasing curves, reclaiming the original musical note form, making the flow more graceful. Sketch number 5 sees the graphic reduced in height, since the previous iteration was a little bit too tall. A shape was also added to the bottom to represent an earlobe, just as an experiment. In sketch number 6, another shape is introduced at the top to represent the fold of the ear, which is known as the helix. The consequence was the design became too tall once again, and there were too many elements. The design needed to be more simple. And so I persevered and moved on to the next page of my sketchpad to experiment further. Here we have the mood board for the True Tone amplification project, which I've constructed in Illustrator using pictures which I've extracted from Google Images. I'll be using this mood board as inspiration for ideas in the mind mapping process, and I'll be referencing it throughout the project to obtain ideas as I work. In particular, I'll be noting the style of current brands on the market, and I'll be using them as a basis of what I might favour when developing my design, and of course what I might avoid. The questionnaire too will be close at hand so that I can reference the client's preferences. So I've arranged the mood board in a rough but comprehensible manner. I have the brands of amplifiers situated towards the left hand side, including Marshall, Laney, Blackstar, Orange, Vox, Hughes and Kettner and Hayden, to name a few. Towards the middle right I've introduced brands of guitar. I've included electric guitar brands, bass brands and acoustic guitar brands, including PRS, Martin, Tanglewood, Crafter and Cordoba. Towards the bottom I've included pictures of each type of guitar which the client's product is designed for, to get a feel of the overall picture and purpose. Bottom right I have examples of combo amplifiers, cabinets and heads. This gives me a rough idea of how logos look on similar products. Top right I have Bang & Olufsen logos and a few pictures of their products and branding style. The client stipulated that they wished for True Tone to be the Bang & Olufsen of amplifiers, and so I've referenced the unique upmarket style of this company to consider during the planning process. So that represents the mood board for this project, and it's this I'll be using to segue into the mind mapping process, where it will assist in giving me direction for a unique brand for True Tone amplification. So looking at sketch number 13, I've reversed the flare of the negative channel. The thin gap now starts at the bottom and widens at the top. This doesn't tend to work since the helix of the ear folds out to reveal contours, through lack of a better way to describe it, and this achieves the exact opposite. In sketch 14, I reverted back to the flared negative space of sketch number 12, thin at the top and wide at the bottom. In this instance, however, I apply a much greater gap to the bottom. This version looks good, but I'm concerned that the large gap might have disassociated the two shapes somewhat, diminishing the ear concept. So onwards to the final iteration of the rough sketches, which is sketch number 15. Here I introduce a bigger ball to the bottom of the musical note. In turn, however, this creates a bigger earlobe, which is too prominent, and so I disregarded this version. So to summarise, I have two favourites and I'm torn between them. Those are sketch number 14 and sketch number 11. Thankfully, however, there is no difference in design form between the two. The only difference is the position of the top helix shape, and so I'm free to position this as I see fit in the software later. Now the shape not only represents the helix of an ear, but it's also emerged to look like a sound wave emanating from the musical note. So I've achieved a fantastic double meaning. So now I'll be positioning this shape with not only the ear concept in mind, but also the emanating sound wave. Thanks to the sketching process and those 15 iterations, I've found a fantastic solution and things have gotten very interesting. So onwards to the refinement sketching stage, where you'll see me develop a perfect version on paper, ready to place and trace in the software. Using rough sketch number 11 as reference, I produced a refinement sketch, as you see here. The sketch is intended as the more perfect version, which I drew out on dot paper to get a feel for measurement. As you'll see, I scanned this sketch, and it's this which I'll be placing in Illustrator to trace over. Before I drew this sketch, I analysed the overall symbol for presence of where primitive shapes, in this case circles, might be used. Using the curves of circles naturally gives me a more perfect result. You'll see that there are faint circles on the sketch where I've used them to produce the near perfect curves and circular shapes of the symbol. In total, I've utilised 6 circles as guides for both positive and negative portions of the symbol. In a similar fashion, I'll be doing this too in the software as I trace over the sketch, in which I'll be placing circles on top of each other with the ellipse tool. Because I've put all the required effort in on paper and came up with a near perfect result, the work required in the software now is absolutely minimal, since I have solid direction and no need to improvise. And so let's proceed to the software and go about digitizing this symbol. So here we are in Illustrator. I've created a new document, and now I'm going to place the refinement sketch into the document. So to do this, I'm going to go to File, Place. I'm going to select the file on my computer. I'm going to click Place, and I'm going to drag it out. And you'll see it's aligned vertically. And so I'm just going to turn that around by going to the top right hand corner until those arrows appear. I'm going to hold Shift so it locks on to the horizontal. And I'm going to go to Properties. I'm going to click Embed. So now this image is embedded within the file rather than being linked to. So when I open this file in the future, this drawing will be part of it. So with that done, I'm actually going to create a mask here so I don't see all the outside of the sketch and just the sketch itself. So I'm going to pull out a rectangle over this. With Shift held, I'm going to select the sketch behind the rectangle. I'm going to go to Object, Clipping Mask and Make. And I'm going to increase this in size so that we have something substantial to work on top of. Holding Shift to keep proportions. Like so. Next, I'm going to go to the Properties panel. I'm going to reduce the opacity of the sketch down to 50% so I can see more clearly the shapes and pen tool which I place on top of the sketch. Next, I'm going to go to the Layers panel and I'm going to lock down this layer so that the sketch doesn't move whilst I'm working. So I'm going to click right of the eye icon until a padlock appears. This denotes the layer as locked. Next, I'm going to add a new layer by clicking Create New Layer at the bottom of the Layers panel, and this is the layer that I'm going to draw on top of. So this is the plan of attack. First, we're going to draw the curvy circular shapes with the ellipse tool to draw circles to begin. We're going to join these curved circular shapes where necessary, such as this point for instance on this S shape, using the pen tool. Finally, we're going to round off the pointed ends of the shapes. So with the form of the graphic analysed to establish the best approach, particularly with the use of simple primitive geometrical shapes, it's now time to digitize the symbol. So let's go ahead and utilise the ellipse tool to draw out a series of circles. And I'm going to select hot pink from the swatches because that stands out quite nicely. Holding Shift, I'm going to drag out a circle, selecting my draw layer, which is layer 2. And holding Shift to keep the proportions. I'm going to go to the Properties panel and I'm going to bring down the opacity to 50% so that I can see the sketch behind. Holding Shift, I'm just going to adjust this circle further until it matches the sketch as close as possible beneath. With Alt and Shift, I'm going to drag out another circle. and I'm going to place this over the top, and this is going to be cut out from the circle at the bottom. So just matching this up as close as possible to the sketch beneath. Here you'll see that I'm following this circle, the faint circle that I drew in the refinement sketch. And I'm going to adjust the circle at the bottom slightly. With that done, I'm going to select the circle on the top, holding Shift. I'm also going to select the circle on the bottom. In the Pathfinder panel, beneath Shape Modes, I'm going to click -front. And this herein is the result. As you'll see, that circle has now been deducted from the circle at the back. Now we have the perfect version of the shape that's in the sketch, minus those rounded ends. So next I'm going to work on this hook shape here. So using the ellipse tool once again and holding Shift to keep the proportion of the circle, I'm going to drag one out like so. Going to the Properties panel, I'm going to assign the same opacity of around 50% again, so I can see the sketch beneath. And I'm going to adjust this in size to match the sketch as close to as possible, always holding Shift to keep the proportions. And once that's done with the selection tool, I'm going to use Alt and Shift to drag down a copy of this circle, which saves me having to reassign the opacity. So holding Shift to resize and positioning this to match the sketch beneath. Just adjusting the circle at the bottom ever so slightly, like so. With that done, I'm going to highlight the circle on top, holding Shift. I'm going to select the circle at the bottom also, and I'm going to go to the Pathfinder panel again. Beneath Shape Modes, I'm going to click -front, so this deducts the circle on top from the circle at the bottom. Next, you'll see we have a circle down here, and we could go ahead and place a circle here, but first we need to draw attention to this larger circle because we want to take advantage of the ability of a circle to create this entire curve around here. So with the ellipse tool once again, with Shift held, I'm going to drag out a circle as before. Going to the properties, the opacity will be reduced to 50% as to see the sketch beneath, which I'm going to match as close to as possible with this circle. So now that those three fundamental shapes are in place, I can now go about making the necessary adjustments to take out parts of the circles which aren't needed, and I can begin to join the shapes to achieve a single flowing symbol. So reviewing what we have so far, you'll see that I need to take out a portion here, which is negative space, and a portion here, which is negative space. I'm actually going to delete half of this circle because that's all we need to define this curve here at the bottom. And so to do this, I'm going to select the eraser. Now we'll say I only have a 10 stroke assigned to this, and it might take a while to erase. So I'm going to go to the tool options in properties, and I'm going to increase this in size to 100 or thereabouts. So I now have a stroke size of 100 for the eraser, and I can now go about erasing the unneeded parts of these shapes. And I'm going to do the one up top. I may have to decrease the stroke slightly, bring that down to around 70, and just deleting this portion here. Now that's only rough because I am going to tidy this up later with nice flowing curves, but that's the bulk of the unneeded parts of those shapes removed. We can now see the form of it coming together, resembling the sketch. So the next thing I'm going to do is to place a circle here, the smaller circle down the bottom. So with the ellipse tool, I'm going to go ahead and do exactly that. Now after I do this, I may need to erase more of the shape beneath, but we'll see how it pans out. So pulling out a circle, holding Shift to match the sketch as close as possible. And in the properties panel, reducing the opacity again to 50% so that we can see the sketch beneath. Now zooming in, We need to ensure that this curve here matches the curve of this circle as close to as possible. So using the up arrow on the keyboard just to make slight adjustments, bringing the circle upwards. I'm going to highlight the shape at the bottom and selecting the eraser. I'm going to take out this portion here which is overhanging. So just clicking once, that does the job. And you'll see we seem to have a better adjoining curve here. Next, I'm going to select this circle. I'm going to hold Shift to select the other shape beneath. In the Pathfinder options at top right of the Pathfinder panel, I'm going to click Make Compound Shape and I'm going to click Expand. Now, there may be a glitch down here, but I'm going to go on to fix that later on. The main focus is to develop the overall shape of the symbol for now. So with the zoom tool, let's proceed to zoom out to review the symbol, holding Alt. So now comes a time when I'm going to attempt to join this shape at the bottom with this shape at the top using the pen tool. So I'll have to make this curve down here, flow around and up to join the path up top. I'll also have to do the same at the right hand side whilst creating a very slight pleasing dip in the curvature here. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to have to zoom in again, so with the zoom tool, I'm going to move right in there. With the pen tool selected, I'm going to click the path of this circle. And I'm going to click again to create an anchor point on the bottom of that curve. Using the control handles to shape it, I'm going to create another anchor point up here. Like so. I can always adjust this curve later on. So the main focus now is to just get these two shapes connected with a reasonably pleasing form. So clicking up here to join, you'll see that the word path appears, which denotes the fact that we're on the path of the shape, which is exactly where we want to be. I'm pulling downwards to create that curve which we see in the sketch beneath. Just manipulating that, moving the mouse, like so. At this point I want to go to the properties and I want to bring the opacity down because it's drawing out pink at 100% and we can't see the sketch. With that done, I'm going to click in the middle here and I'm going to click down below and I'm going to close this shape. So that means I can work on the right hand side independently from this shape. And it gives me time to assess things as well. I can take a look at this shape to see if I'm happy, which I am. So we've split the jobs down into two, the left hand side and the right hand side. So let's go right ahead and work on the right hand side of this part of the symbol here. Now as you can see by the sketch beneath, there's a portion in pink here which is extending downwards way more than we need. And so with the eraser tool once again, I'm going to erase this portion to the part where the circle meets 9 o'clock. And I'm happy with that. So now I'm going to go ahead and create a pleasing flowing curve which joins this part of the shape here with this part down here. Now to do that, of course, I'll be using the pen tool for this job. So selecting the pen tool and clicking upon the anchor point, which is at the 9 o'clock of that circle where we just finished with the eraser. Clicking one there, clicking another down here and pulling outwards like so, matching the sketch as close as possible. So as you'll see, it dips in and comes out slightly before it meets the shape at the bottom. And so the next anchor point is going to be around here. I'm going to pull outwards and you'll see already we're making that pleasing shape that dips inwards. So bringing it down slightly to match the sketch and letting go. Now doing the same again, I'm going to click that anchor point. I'm going to click out here and another one up here just to close the shape like so. Now zooming out, holding Alt with the zoom tool, I'm going to select all of these shapes now. The one we've just created, the one on the left, holding shift, the one up top, and the one at the bottom. With that done, I'm going to the Pathfinder panel, clicking the options at top right, and clicking Make Compound Shape. Now I'm going to expand it by clicking Expand. Now this is now a solid shape. So now you can see it coming together. We have the pleasing curves moving upwards from the bottom to the top as we created previously, and this one moving downwards like so, with that pleasing curve that bends in here. So with this you can appreciate how we can create an overall pleasing shape by building it up in portions. And so this is the result of having created 4 separate shapes, and we've merged them all together into a single compound shape. So if we ever find ourselves in a position where the illustration is too overwhelming and perhaps beyond our capabilities with the pen tool, remember to review the form of the illustration to see where you can use primitive geometrical shapes, in this case circles, and above all, build it in portions. Okay, so now to round off these sharp points on these shapes. So we've already developed a curve down here, but one that consists of negative space. Now for consistency, it would be good to have the same shaped curve applied to this part of the shape and these parts of the shape up top. Now to do this, we're going to use a makeshift guide. Now I'm going to zoom in, and the guide we're going to use is going to consist of an ellipse, true to fashion. Now I'm going to draw out an ellipse holding shift to keep proportions, and I'm going to try and closely match this curve in the negative space as close as possible, like so. So that's a good fit. And so I'm going to make a copy of this shape, and I'm going to bring it up towards the top. And as you'll see, the rounded portion of the sketch is here, but the graphic we've drawn on top would extend the end of the line down to this point where I've placed the circle, just due to the fact that how it's panned out as I've drawn those perfect circles. And this happens in logo design, but it's perfectly acceptable to have this extend to the point of the circle. So I'm going to zoom in with the pen tool. I'm going to click on the anchor point at the end of the large shape, and I'm going to click on the path of the circle. I'm going to make that bend very slightly. It doesn't have to be perfect because I am going to be cleaning this up later. Clicking the anchor point, I'm going to move across the circle until I meet the path once again on the opposite side. I'm going to do another click, and I'm going to click to meet that anchor point on the shape above. And with that shape closed, I'm going to select the circle, this shape and the large shape. I'm going to go to the options of the Pathfinder. I'm going to click Make Compound Shape and Expand to make this a singular shape. Now, as stated, these bits that you note are imperfect and these will be fixed later. Zooming out, we want to take another copy of this circle to apply it to this shape. And so zooming in again, I'm going to bring the circle up to the point where it touches the path of the shape at the top and at the bottom. So it's best to zoom in further just to get some accuracy here. Like so. Now with that done, I'm now going to select the large So now it's time to pair the true tone symbol with a suitable font. I've browsed the font foundry within the script and sans serif categories since the client has stipulated these font preferences in the questionnaire. I also browsed the futuristic category for other font options. Script and futuristic fonts tend to suggest two different things, so I needed to strike up a balance and style to portray a brand which is technologically advanced and modern, two things which are also stated in the questionnaire. In total, I decided upon these 10 fonts, from which I'll whittle down to 1. Here you'll see I've introduced a symbol to each font by using the file place option in Illustrator, and I've also applied the tagline in a smaller font. The tagline is less important, and so I'll adjust this later once I've decided upon the main font for the company name. I've placed the symbol in different positions which fit the font form nicely to give me an overall idea of how they might appear to complement each other. These symbol positions of course aren't final, I'll be experimenting with different layouts later. So looking at the first font at top left, this is a script font which resembles personalised handwriting. This tends to give an upbeat, trustworthy feel. It flows nicely and functions well with the symbol, since they both feature cursive shapes. Legibility is acceptable, especially for a script font of this nature, and so this is one I'll be taking through to the next stage. Moving on to the font below, this too is in a similar style to the last. Again, the symbol works nicely in the same manner for the same reasons, because each shares a similar and complementary form, symbol and text. The T is more cursive and gives the overall font and logo a slightly different feel. Due to the form of this character, however, it affects the legibility, and so I'm favouring the font above instead. The third font down on the left sees a bolder script font in a calligraphy style. The form of each character works exceptionally well with the form of the symbol. We also have a sense of a flowing rhythm in the form of the italic characters, which works well with a musical amplification theme. Legibility is moderate but arguably better than the previous logo. Again, we have the personalised feel in the style of font to evoke trust in the brand. Since this font works so well with the symbol actually looking like part of the font, this is one I'll definitely be taking through to the next stage in the whittling process. Fourth font down on the left, we have a very different type of font. This font features a joined up style, but each character is more rigid and intentionally stylized for consistency. In turn, we lose the personalised feel and the brand takes on a kind of vintage form. Vintage is the new modern, and so this is still a viable option to consider. Though the symbol works well with the form of the characters, legibility isn't very good, with the R tending to throw off the flow of the text, making it unreadable without a degree of concentration. It's for this reason I will discount this option. The logo at the bottom of the left-hand column sees an eloquently stylized script font, again with a calligraphy feel. This makes the brand look prestigious and the style ties in nicely with the subject of music. But again, legibility suffers as a result of the letter forms, particularly the T, which could be seen as an F. Since the company name features a word, true, which is misspelled intentionally to be unique, it's ever important that the letters are clear. Moving on to the right hand side column, the first at the top sees use of all uppercase characters using a sans serif font. This style is simplistic with a nice form given to the R. Due to the simplicity, the legibility is excellent. The symbol is heavy in contrast to the type, though this could be reduced in size. The symbol too is cursive and the lettering is a little too blocky and stiff in comparison. I do have an idea on how to combat this issue, however, and I'll explore this later. Needless to say, as a result of the fantastic legibility, I'll be taking this through to the next stage. So moving on to the next, this is a sans serif techie kind of font. The font is streamlined by way of its form and the applied italic, and legibility is good. The font also contrasts well enough with the symbol since the weight is similar. Regardless of those plus points, this font, or ones that are very similar, are very common and overused. Since I'd like to establish no less than a unique brand, it's for this reason I'm disregarding this font. In the third logo down, I've chosen a rounded, modern sans serif in uppercase. I like the overall style and I feel like it's a rounded version of the top right logo. I'm not keen on the letter R, however, and I don't feel that I favour this font enough above the others I've chosen to go about adjusting this character to my liking. Again, this is a thin font and the weight of the symbol is heavy in contrast. With those things in mind, I'm going to reject and move on to the next. Here we have a decorative font utilising uppercase characters. The form of the font is unique, but there are some unpleasing curves to the E and the two T's, causing the legibility to suffer. The symbol tends to clash somewhat too. This is a very different font and I feel it does have potential, but due to the fact that this doesn't offer good readability due to awkward shaping in the characters, I'm going to pass on this also. The final font at the bottom is a condensed style, which means each character is vertically dominant. Fonts of this nature are less legible from a distance, but offer good to reasonable legibility close up. I particularly like the style of this font, and regardless of its block form, it works well with a cursive symbol and communicates music effectively. I'd like to experiment with this font, and so I'm going to take it through to the next stage. So here we have the final 4 logos, or final 4 fonts, which I've whittled down to. And now I'm going to experiment with different layouts. That's to say, I'm going to experiment with the symbol at different sizes, at different places relevant to the text. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to move these logos down slightly, just to make room for versions of these logos. And I'm going to make a copy of these logos, Alt and Shift, drag down a copy, and I'm going to make another copy again. Now, I'm going to move the symbol to the top this time for this version, down here, like so. Let's move these up slightly to give me some room. And for the next one, I'm going to place a symbol directly at the left-hand side, as opposed to offsetting it at the top left-hand side, as we see in the top version. So there we have it. Moving these up and working on these ones down the bottom. I'm going to make a copy with Alt and Shift, dragging down and doing the same again. Now I'm going to move back up here, and I did mention I had something in mind for this version because the text was too light in comparison to the symbol. So this is exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to reduce the symbol in size and I'm going to place it in the O. Zooming in. So now with the symbol reduced in size, we lose the weight and we also have a more pleasing solution here. Now, as stated in the client questionnaire, the client has stipulated that they would perhaps consider a logo which consists of text with the symbol combined. So that's exactly what we have here. So this could be one of the options in which we present. So now zooming out, I'm now going to position this symbol on top of the text. Going to Object Ungroup and dragging the symbol up here. Now you'll see the symbol's still quite overbearing in contrast to the text, but nonetheless this will stand as an option. Let's just reduce it slightly and center it the best we can. Okay, so now moving down to the others. Just going to position these. Now we have the one at the top. So I'm going to put this at the side, the symbol at the side of this version. Make it slightly bigger in size. I'll put that there. And for the final one, I think I'm going to go for an option where the symbol is a lot smaller, centralized at the top. Like so. So now working on these ones at the left, you have the one that's top left here above the text, above the R and the U. So I'm going to ungroup and I'm going to place a version at the left hand side here. And for the final one, I'm going to place it central above the text. And I'm going to increase it in size. So with that done, let's try and pull these closer together so we can judge them all within the screen here. And we'll zoom out slightly once I've done that. So bring them in closer. Like so. Selecting the zoom tool and just zooming out holding Alt. Now from these I'm going to decide what the best font is for true tone amplification and the best position for the symbol. Here we have the final options that I prepared and their respective layouts. I've assigned numbers 1 to 6 and letters A and B to identify each logo as I provide commentary. Of those logos in 1 to 3A, I'm drawn to A1. The symbol sits well at the top left of the font. I think this font depicts a personal feel, which has a sense of rhythmic momentum carried by the cursive italic form. On that note, however, I feel that the font of 4A achieves this to a much greater degree with a similar font. This font is more uplifting and has an even more prominent movement. The symbol placed above the U works perfectly too, since as mentioned it looks like part of the actual font, its position emphasising this feel further. So moving on to the right hand column, the symbols of B1 and B3 are too heavy as previously stated, and my attempted solution, which I tried in B2, didn't work as well as I had planned. The symbol simply isn't prominent enough within the O to appreciate its form and its double meaning. Of 4, 5 and 6B, I feel like 6B worked the best with the symbol reduced in size to function better with a thin text. But again, the quality of the symbol is lost at this size. For this reason, I would have settled for 4B as a compromise with its medium-sized symbol as a runner-up. The logo I'm choosing, however, is 4B for all the qualities previously mentioned. To reiterate, above all, I'm really pleased with how the symbol fits in so perfectly, and so it's an option I simply can't ignore. So we proceed with the refinement of this logo to produce the perfect branding solution for true tone amplification. Okay, so here's our final logo design for true tone amplification. Now it needs cleaning up in the text and in the symbol. So I'm going to go right ahead and select the logo. I'm going to go to Object Ungroup. I'm going to select the main text. I'm going to go to Type and Create Outlines so that the font is now made into shapes. So this font is no longer editable. That's to say that I can't actually type something in again. Now this is a permanent fixture. All those characters are now shapes. And I can go in and take a look at the anchor points pertaining to each one of these shapes. Now I'm going to zoom in and I'm going to identify which characters are misshapen, if any. I'm then going to rectify the misshapen characters by either moving anchor points, adjusting control handles, or adding or subtracting parts of shapes. And this will become more clear when I actually demonstrate it, so I'll go ahead and do exactly that. So zooming in. Now if I use the direct selection tool to select each character shape, you'll perhaps notice that we have more anchor points than necessary. For a more simplistic font, we go on to rectify the shapes to ensure that each only has the minimum number of anchor points necessary. A script font, however, in this case, so let's go right ahead and tackle those aforementioned imperfections. So selecting the ellipse tool, I'm going to drag out an oval shape and I'm going to tilt it slightly and I'm going to place it on top of the R. So we're going to replace this imperfect shape that we previously mentioned. I'm going to actually colour this a pink and I'm going to reduce the opacity down to around 50% so I can see the version beneath. And I'm going to zoom in slightly. So I'm going to try and match the original as close as possible around its edges. And I'm happy with that. So zooming out, I'm going to select the text. I'm going to go to Object, Ungroup, and with the pink new ellipse selected, holding Shift and selecting the R at the same time, I'm going to go to the Pathfinder panel. At top right, I'm going to select Make Compound Shape and I'm going to click Expand. So there we have the new R. The last thing I need to do for this character is click black, of course, and increase the opacity back to 100%. Okay, now let's zoom in and take a look at the T. Now with the direct selection tool, I can select the T and I can take a look at the anchor point situation. As you can see, there actually aren't many anchor points on this curve on the outside or the curve and point on the inside. And so we can approach this in a different manner. Now the first thing I'm going to do is tackle this negative space here. And I'm going to select the anchor point tool. Now clicking upon the point at the top here, I can now convert that into a curve. So that previous corner is now a curve, and I can now use this control handle with a direct selection tool to drag up a curve like so. Now we still have extra anchor points that we don't need on this curve, so I'm going to go ahead and select the delete anchor point tool, and I'm going to click to delete that anchor point up top, and I can use the direct selection tool to pull out this curve further if need be. Now I'm happy with that position, and that makes that curve inside that negative space more perfect. So let's go ahead and tackle the top of the T. With the direct selection tool selected, I'm going to select the shape, and as you'll see, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 unnecessary anchor points. The anchor points on the left corner here and the right corner are all we need to define this curve around here. So, using the delete anchor point tool, I'm going to delete the first, second, third, fourth and fifth anchor points, and I'm going to use these control handles to redevelop this curve around here. So with the direct selection tool, I'm going to pull out this handle like so, and I'm going to use this handle also. So the aim here isn't just to create an attractive arc here, but to create one continuous flowing loop, as if it's being drawn by a pen. So I'm going to adjust further, just so that we can achieve a better flow from this line to the line up top. To achieve this, I'm going to bring this control handle up slightly and to the right. And having achieved that, that marks completion of the T shape. So now moving on to the O, as you can see it dips in slightly here, so we're going to go on to remedy this. With a direct selection tool, I'm going to select the shape, and we have anchor points around here which aren't needed. So again, I'm going to use the delete anchor point tool to delete the first, the second and the third. Now I'm going to use a control handle with a direct selection tool at either side to recreate that shape so that it flows nicely around here as if it's a pen stroke. So using this control handle on the left, bringing it upwards, and the one on the right, like so. And there we have a perfect result. So that's the O finished, so now we'll move on to the next character shape. And we know that the N was fine, so the last is the E here. So select, see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4 anchor points which are not needed because these two anchor points, one at the bottom and one at the top, define this curve here, or so they will once we delete these 4. So to delete them, we're going to use the delete anchor point tool once again and delete 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to use the control handles once again at top and bottom to recreate that curve in a more pleasing manner. Again, our overall goal is to create a continuous loop around this E here, as if it's being drawn by a pen in a single stroke. So using the control handle down the bottom, I'm going to bring that out and pull out to review. Just going to bring it up very slightly. And with that done, that marks completion of that curve. So whilst I'm here, I can also tell that this part of the E isn't perfect neither, especially down the bottom here. So I'm going to select the shape and I'm going to use the delete anchor point tool to delete all of these anchor points but 2. I'm going to delete the one up here, one down here, all of these anchor points around the curve until I'm left with this. Now I'm going to use this control handle on the anchor point down here. I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to bring down this handle here, and using this handle I'm going to pull outwards and upwards and adjusting with this handle up here. So now I'm left with a pleasing flowing E shape, And this concludes the cleaning up of the text. Okay, now it's time to go ahead and clean up the symbol of the logo. So zooming in, if you recall, there's 3 points that need rectifying in this design. And it's this point here, as you'll see. This point at the top, which isn't so apparent until we zoom in, and this bit down the bottom. Now we'll start from the top down. Zooming in, with the direct selection tool, you'll see that we have anchor points here. 2, possibly 1, isn't necessary here. Zooming further into this, you'll see we have a pair of anchor points which are unnecessary. So using the delete anchor point tool, I'm going to go ahead and delete this anchor point here. As you'll see, zooming out, it makes quite a change to the shape, and so I'll have to remodel the shape using this control handle. Now I'm going to do something to ensure that this is perfectly circular. I'm going to use a circle as a guide. I'm going to choose a pink colour, and with the ellipse tool I'm going to pull out a circle here, and I'm going to match it up to the curve of the crescent. I'm going to go to properties, I'm going to go to opacity, I'm going to bring it down to around 50% so that I can see behind the pink shape. So adjusting it slightly so that it matches up with the crescent at the bottom section here. And that's good enough. I'm going to cut it. I'm going to create a new layer in the layers panel by clicking create new layer at the bottom. I want to paste the circle back in on that new layer. As you'll see, it needs to be readjusted again, but I've done that quickly and efficiently. And so I'm going to lock this by clicking next to the eye until a padlock appears. I'm going to select the symbol. I'm going to go to Object, Ungroup. And now I'm going to select the crescent, in particular this anchor point. And I'm going to use this control handle to pull out until the line or the segment matches the path of the circle. And I'm going to use the handle to the right hand side also. And there we have it. We can now go ahead and delete the pink circle guide, which we no longer need. Okay, so now let's zoom in again and see what we can do with the bottom portion. And I think the best way forward is to just delete this anchor point here. So let's go ahead and try that with the delete anchor point tool. I'm going to click upon it, deselect, and that's done the job perfectly. So zooming out and zooming in to the next position that we need to rectify. So as you can see here, we have a glitch which consists of 2 anchor points. So we have like a little step in the path here. Now I'm going to show you an alternative method of fixing this so that we don't have to go through the rigmarole of using that circular guide again. So what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to select the pen tool with black selected. I'm going to click that anchor point. I'm going to click the path of the circle end, and I'm simply going to pull out a curve. I'm going to click that anchor point at the end, and I'm going to click into the shape. With that done, I'm going to select both the shape and the original shape. I'm going to go to the Pathfinder panel. I'm going to click Make Compound Shape and Expand. You will note that we have an anchor point in the middle here, so we can simply go ahead and delete that and use this handle to build that curve once again. So as you can see, out of those 2 fixes, this one is the easiest for this application, but it's useful in remembering the options you have available to you when it comes to deleting and utilising anchor points and control handles in your own projects. Now it's time to apply the tagline to the True Tone amplification logo. I've chosen 8 favourite fonts on the Font Foundry website. You'll see that the logos are large in comparison to when we were selecting the font for the word True Tone. This is so that I can see the form of each font clearly. For the sake of maximum legibility, I've selected all sans serif fonts. This also means that there's no little details which are necessary for lettering, which will in many applications be displayed at a small size. Although every font is a sans serif, each has its characteristic nuances, which sets a unique overall feel for each logo. All are in uppercase too, to further add to the legibility of each. So jumping right in and reviewing the first font. This font, named ASAP, is the original font which was used when we were selecting a font for the word True Tone. Basic in its form, the font is highly legible, though it may appear too formal against the more characteristic font which we used for the more dominant part of the logo. For this reason, I'll pass on this font for the tagline. The second font, named Neo-Latina, has a rounded box form. There are dislocations to certain characters which don't tend to flow well, and the overall font is quite rigid in appearance. Overall, the font is a bit too futuristic too, which kind of opposes the feel of the vintage form that I'm keen to depict. For these reasons, this font will be discounted. The next font, named Plymdale, has a flowing rounded form. This font is particularly interesting since the flowing form of each character could suggest wiring, and this is especially suited to a brand which involves electronics. There are gaps in some characters, but due to the sheer value of the wiring concept, these gaps would be justified, since each character needs to appear as if it's made out of a stretch of wire, as opposed to a loop. So I've got great enthusiasm for this font, and needless to say, it's a keeper. The font down, named Titillion Web, has a simple form. The characteristic of this font is flat tops where points are usually present. The A, M and N, for instance, have this quality at their peak. Saying that I wish to depict a smooth flowing tone for the overall logo, I want to avoid rigidness and straight lines where they aren't strictly necessary. Whilst these nuances would be incredibly subtle, it's a font I'm keen to dismiss. On to the next. This font is named Dosis. Although its form is good, due to the fact that each character is vertically dominant, it tends to go against the grain of the overall flow. As I've discovered by the one that I previously favoured, a horizontally dominant font is much more suited to achieving the flowing, streamline feel. Since the logo should have a pleasing figurative movement, I need to reject all fonts which stand as rigid as buildings, and so this one won't be considered. Moving down, this font is named Queen of Camelot. The font is currently quite bold, but at a lesser weight, this would perhaps be a suitable font for the subject, even if it is perhaps on the techie side. This style of font, however, is severely overused, particularly in the electronics business sector, so I will avoid using this. Next up, we have a font named Flamante Round. As the name suggests, this is a font with a quality of roundness given to the end of each character. It's subtle, but it's there. This is a no-frills font, simple in its appearance. This would be a contender, but it doesn't bear a quality which is better than the previous font, which resembled wiring. So on that basis, I'm going to pass this one up. Finally, this font, named Capriola Regular, is admittedly very similar to the last font, with very subtle roundedness applied to the end of each character. There are some notable differences in form, however, the M in particular, which flares outwards, and the C, which has a quirky upper curl. Again, this is very appealing as a simple, legible font, which was the original idea. Since I've found a font with potential meaning behind it, however, the clear winner amongst the 8 fonts is Plydale. And so here stands the final logo design, symbol, main name and tagline, ready to be carried into the next stage. In the same manner in which we kern the main word of a logo design, we also kern the tagline. To kern the tagline, we can simply use the rectangle tool to draw up shapes as a basis of measurement between characters. So let's do exactly that and kern this tagline to perfection. So let's go ahead and select the zoom tool and zoom into the tagline. Then we're going to select the rectangle tool. Here you'll see I have a red selected. So this is going to stand out between the characters because they're coloured black. So here we have the A and the M. So what we're going to do is to draw a rectangle between the stem of the A on the right hand side and the stem of the M on the left hand side, like so. Now this rectangle is now the basis of measurement. So holding shift, we're going to drag it across to the M and the P, lining it up against the stem of the M and the stem of the P. And here you'll see this is a perfect kern between those two characters. Now we're going to move on to the P and the L. Holding shift and dragging this rectangle across, you'll see that the rectangle is overlapping the P here. Now this is perfectly fine. The P needs to be closer to the L than the rest of the letters that we've done so far. This is because the curve of the P lacks surface area in comparison to the stem of a character. It is only this point here of the curve which is actually the closest to the opposing character. So this is fine. Let's scroll across and move that rectangle once again. So holding shift to lock it down on the horizontal as you drag it across. Now this could do with a bit of adjustment perhaps, so let's go ahead and do that. Selecting the text first, we go to type, create outlines. So these are now shapes. Do ensure that you save a copy of your work where the fonts are in the raw editable format before you trace them down. So let's go ahead and move that I, but we'll have to zoom out and move every other letter with it. So selecting the I and all characters to the right hand side, I've took it across 2 clicks on the keyboard. I've pressed the arrow key to the right. So let's go in and see what change that's made. I think I'm going to go back 1 on the keyboard to the left and I'm going to measure that up, and that's fine. So now holding the shift, I'm going to drag this over again to do the measurement against the F. We have 2 stems and that looks perfect. Holding shift again, dragging across. This needs adjustment perhaps. No, but we'll measure from the top of the F. Yes, we'll adjust this very slightly. So zooming out, selecting that I and all characters to the right hand side. I'm going to use the keyboard, right arrow key, and press it once. Now zooming back in. Now I've went a little farther, so I'm going to zoom out again. I'm going to select all those characters again. I'm just going to do a manual adjustment, holding shift to keep all locked on the horizontal and zooming in again. We should now have a better fit for that rectangle. And now that's fine. So dragging it across, holding shift, we're going to measure it up against the C. Now the same principle applies to the C as it does the P, as we mentioned previously. We have lack of surface area on the C because it doesn't have a stem. It only comes round and has the closest point of the neighbouring character around this area. And so it's closer to the I to compensate for that factor. So now holding shift and dragging it across once again. And the same thing applies to this side of the C. And so the C is closer to the A. So scrolling across, holding shift, dragging our measurement again. Now, the A has a stem and the T has a horizontal up here. So ideally would want this to be at a greater distance than it is currently. So highlighting the T and all letters to the right hand side, I'm holding shift on the keyboard, dragging across. And now that looks good. I'm going to hold shift and drag that rectangle over again to measure up against the I. Now as you can see, this needs adjustment. So I'm going to highlight the I, the O and the N together and make that adjustment. Holding shift, dragging across Now you'll see again we have that principle of the O in the surface area, so this is fine. As you'll see, there's an overlap of the rectangle, which is absolutely fine. And it's going to be the same case for this side of the O and the N. We'll have the overhang to compensate for the lack of surface area. So with that done, this marks completion of the kerning for the True Tone Amplification tagline. In the same manner in which we can use rectangular shapes to kern, we can also do the same thing to align elements. It's especially important that the tagline is aligned correctly on the horizontal and given an amount of space between it and the main text which looks aesthetically pleasing. The tagline shouldn't be too close as to hinder legibility, yet it shouldn't be too distant to a point where it becomes partially disassociated. Alignment will be a reasonably quick process, so I'm going to explore afterwards how I might make this design that little bit better by applying simple elements at either side of the tagline. So let's go ahead and grab the rectangle tool to begin alignment of the tagline. And with the colour red selected so that it stands out over the black, I'm going to go to the end of this T here. I'm going to click and pull out a rectangle to the point of the wall of the A of the tagline. With that done, I'm going to copy that across. With Alt and Shift, I'm going to drag across this rectangle and I'm going to place it at the very end of the E. Like so. Okay, you see it as it happens, and as you can see, the rectangle is actually flush against the N, which indicates that I've actually been precision perfect in my judgment. That's to say that the tagline is central to the text. It doesn't always happen, but obviously I've been fortunate enough for it to happen in this case. If I had seen any shortcomings or overlaps in the measurements, I would have adjusted accordingly, moving the whole tagline left or right and using further rectangles to measure. Okay, now to work on the vertical. So there's no hard and fast rules for this, so I'm just going to go ahead and judge by eye. Currently looking at the logo, I feel as if the tagline is a little bit too far down. That's to say there's too much of a gap between the main text and the tagline here. So I'm just going to go ahead, highlight the tagline, and I'm going to click up on the keyboard using the up arrow, and I'm going to bring it to this point here. So with that done, I'm going to see if I can drum up a better balance in this logo by introducing elements at either side of the tagline, in accordance with the principles I discussed earlier. So I'm going to highlight the whole logo, ensure that it's grouped by going to Object Group, which it is. So I'm going to reduce it in size, holding Shift to keep proportions. And I'm going to make 2 copies. And I'm going to zoom in. Now what I have in mind is first a simple bullet points at either side of the tagline. And I'm going to choose a circle. Holding Shift to keep a proportion of the circle. And using the keyboard just to adjust the position here. Holding Alt and Shift, I'm going to drag over a copy here. Next, I'm going to use a rectangle tool as a measurement. Like so. I'm going to drag the measurement, holding Shift, over to the right hand side. And I'm going to adjust this bullet point so that it fits in between. So I'm going to zoom out, and next I'm going to work on this one, and what I'm going to do here is introduce lines using the rounded rectangle tool. Like so. I'm going to colour that black. And I'm going to go to Object Flatten Transparency, so this shape won't change anymore, so all options for this shape are no longer in existence. So the shape that you see is the shape that will always be. Just going to reduce this in size slightly, like so. With that done, Alt and Shift to make a copy. Again, using the rectangle tool, colouring red, to establish that measurement once again. Copying this across, holding Shift to lock it on the horizontal. And adjusting this with the keyboard arrows. Like so. Now I'm going to zoom out and I'm going to make judgment. So to recap on the principle, looking at the top original logo, due to the form of the characters, the feel of overall balance is slightly disrupted. If we look at the T in particular, you can see that it stretches out to the left at the top, yet beneath that there's a region of negative space. The E on the right hand side in comparison fills this area. Because of the shape of the T and the E respectively, can cause the tagline to look too far left. To combat this, we can introduce elements to either side of the tagline. Doing so fills spaces at either side, creating more figurative bulk to the tagline, which in turn emphasises that it is indeed centred. So below the top logo we have the solutions. Both achieve the same thing, so it's just a matter of judging the aesthetics of each. I feel like the rounded bullet points are more subtle, and as such they don't detract from the legibility of the text. I feel like the overall look too, with balance in mind, is an improvement over the original logo, so it's this logo I'm going to select as the final. So that covers the principles of tagline alignment and balance. Now this logo is now ready for the next stage. It's common for fonts to have glitches, so earlier we cleaned up the true tone part of the logo by redrawing curves for better aesthetics. Now the tagline is no exception. Despite the fact that I could tell that it's a good quality font at the size I was previously reviewing it, zooming in may well reveal glitches. It's especially important to ensure everything is perfect, since the logo might be blown up to the size of a billboard. So let's go ahead and review each character in the tagline to ensure all is well. If it isn't, we'll fix it. So moving straight in with the zoom tool, I'm going to zoom firstly into the A. Which looks fine. Scrolling across, I'm now going to review the M. Checking the curves at the bottom, the curves around the inside and up top. Everything appears fine, so scrolling across to the next character, which is a P. Again, everything looks fine here. We've got a nice curve flowing around, a nice curve at the ends. So scrolling across to the L. And everything appears fine. We've got verticals here. Everything's straight and everything's nicely shaped. The I2 appears fine. Moving to the F. Everything's fine here too. The I, again we've already reviewed an I, so it's likely this shape is a replica of the previous. Now the C, this is circular around here. This looks perfect enough, and it does around the outside also. Scrolling across to the A, all straight, all round, everything's fine. Scrolling again to the T, we have nice verticals, horizontals, nice ends. Scrolling across, here we have the I again, we can skip that. The O, perfect circle, or perfect oval rather, absolutely fine. Moving to the N, we have glitches here and here. So we'll go ahead and fix these curves to make them more flowing, to make the overall character perfect. So with the direct selection tool, we can click upon the character. Now you can see the anchor points around this curve here, as well as everywhere else on the character. Now we can click upon this anchor point and drag it downwards. But you'll see it still looks glitchy. it doesn't flow very well at all. So if we just undo that, and if we click the character again, you'll notice circles here and here. Now if we click upon the circle and pull it down, you'll see that it adjusts the curve more perfectly. So there we have it, a perfect flowing curve. So clicking upon the character again, we locate this circle, and when our cursor's over it, you'll see a curve icon. So we pull this up, like so, and now we have that perfect curve on this side of the character too. So that's an easy way to make perfect curves when you encounter glitches in characters. A professional logo design document is a well organized one. And so now comes the time to arrange the elements of the logo into layers. So in the layers panel, I'm going to create 3 layers. One for the text, one for the symbol, and one for the tagline. So clicking into layer 1, I'm going to label this symbol, like so. Now at the bottom, I'm going to click create a new layer, and I'm going to label this text. And the last, as mentioned, is going to be called tagline, like so. Now I'm going to open up the original layer, which is this one, and I'm going to drop in the elements relating to each. So from here, I can identify the shapes of the text. I can see that this is part of the main text, as are all the letters beneath. So holding Shift, I can highlight all of those and drag these shapes into the text layer. I also have a shape here pertaining to the main text, so I drag this in also. Now I can see the tagline is here, so dragging that into the tagline layer, like so. Now lastly, there's also 2 ellipses here in the symbol layer, and these are the 2 circles at either side of the tagline. So selecting these, holding Shift, we drag these also into the tagline layer. With that done, I can now go about naming each element in each layer. So to click upon this first, we can see that this is the note shape of the symbol. So I'm going to label this note. Next shape down is the sound wave. So I'm going to label this sound wave, like so. So closing the symbol layer, opening up the text layer, I'm going to label this R, the next E, the next N, O, T, U, and a capital T. Now the next thing I'm going to do is arrange these letters so that they read true tone from top to bottom. So clicking upon the T, dragging up, we have T, R, U, E, T, O, N, and E. So with that arrangement, we can immediately identify letters within that line of text. So now we're going to do the same with the tagline. So expanding the tagline layer. Now, if we highlight one of the bullet points at either side of the tagline, we can see which bullet point it is in the layers panel. You'll see a green box has appeared here to indicate the selected art. So I'm going to label this bullet point, or bullet for short, bullet right. So this tells me it's the bullet on the right hand side, and of course the other is the bullet on the left hand side, labeling this bullet left, like so. Right, the word amplification is actually grouped at the moment, so I'm going to expand that. As you can see, this is an N, so I'm going to label this an N. O, I, T, A, C, I, F, I, L, P, M, and finally A. So as I'm arranging these letters for the sake of saving time, this video is now speeded up. Now with that done, I now want to group everything. So starting with the tagline, I want the bullet points to be grouped with the actual text of the tagline so that I can handle it in a singular manner. So highlighting everything, going to Object and Group, you see we have the singular group here in the Layers panel. And we can name this tagline again if we so wish. So moving on to the main text, I'm going to highlight that, go to Object, Group, and you'll see the group in the text layer. And I'll call this text also. Highlighting the two elements of the symbol, if we go to Object, you'll see that it's already grouped. And this should reflect in the Layers panel here. As we see, Group. I'm going to call this symbol also. So with that done, this document is now professionally prepared. The user can now easily identify groups of elements, the elements within the groups because they're named appropriately, and thanks to the colour coding, green, red and blue in this case, we can also identify the elements as we select them on the artboard. So with the design of the True Tone logo complete, we move on to the colouring. In the questionnaire, the client stated that they prefer black with any complementary bright colour of your choice. They've also stated that they dislike purple and yellow, so the latter colour is worthy of note when we come to selecting a bright colour. Since black isn't necessarily the CMYK slider slid right up to 100%, with the other sliders at 0, we're going to experiment with different tones of black. The client more or less stated that the black needs to be the primary colour and the bright colour the second complementary colour. So in this case it would make sense to use the black for the text of True Tone and the bright colour for the symbol. Here you'll see that I've arranged 10 iterations of the logo in an Illustrator document ready for colouring. And so let's jump in and do exactly that. So starting with the first, I'm going to change the colour of the entirety of each logo, and then I'm going to change the colour of the symbol in the next stage. So with that selected, I'm going to go to the colour panel and I'm going to bring down the black slider to 90%. So this is going to stand as the first option. This isn't jet black, it's a form of black which is slightly faded, set at 90%. Moving to the next, I'm going to bring it down to 90 again in the black, and I'm going to bring the magenta up to 20%. So this gives us another subtle option here. Moving on to the next, let's bring that black down again just to escape from the jet black look. I'm going to bring it down to 95%. I'm going to bring the cyan up to 20% here. So it's going to have a hint of blue in it. Magenta up to 10. And let's bring the yellow up to 20. And here we have another option. Now all these are going to be very subtle, but they are going to be more unique as opposed to the jet black. So moving on to the next. I'm going to bring down the black to 85% or thereabouts. Going to move the magenta up to 20. And I'm going to bring the yellow up to 10 and the cyan up to 25. And here stands another option. So on to the fifth. Again, to the colour palette. Let's bring the black down to 85. Let's bring the magenta up to 30. The cyan to 5 and the yellow to 5 also. So here we have an option which would be regarded as black, but to the trained eye or upon close inspection, the magenta is quite high. So we get a pleasing reddish tint. So that's 5 colour options for black set in the left hand column. So let's go on to introduce the various blacks for the column on the right hand side. This time I'm not going to pay attention to the numbers, the percentages in the colour panel. I'm simply going to go ahead and just use the sliders to see what visual result it gives on the canvas. So selecting the first in the right hand column, going to adjust the black slider, the yellow, magenta and cyan, bringing up the black, A bit more cyan. Magenta, and the values I have are 24, 23, 8 and 91. Now that I'm paying attention to those after being satisfied with what I see here. Now on to the next. Now I don't want to escape black too remotely. It needs to look like black, but just a different tone of black, however subtle it may be. So I'm happy with the second. On to the third. Bringing down that black slider again to begin with. Magenta up. Let's have a look. Let's take the magenta right up here. And I'm happy with this as another option. So on to the fourth. I'm just messing around with these sliders here, trying to keep it within the range of what looks like black at all times. Sometimes it might slip into grey, sometimes it might slip into brown. So we're just trying to keep it within the area of black. So that's serving as another option here. On to the last. So working these sliders once again and observing the changes on the canvas. And this will serve as the final. I'm just going to bring down the cyan slightly. And I'm happy with these options. So now I have 10 options of various tones of black. Now, as I keep on emphasizing, you might not be able to see the differences, but I can see the differences on my screen. And we're also going to be able to see the differences quite prominently in print. So if this logo is printed, we are going to see it's a different color in contrast to a jet black. So with our range of blacks established, it's now time to apply colour to the symbol. Regardless of the symbol comprising of two shapes, only one colour will be applied. Since the client questionnaire stipulates use of two colours in total, and we've already expended one with the use of black. The client has requested use of a secondary bright colour, so our options are quite expansive. Before we proceed, however, since the symbol holds the most meaning, it's important to ask what we want to achieve from colouring it. The symbol boasts a double entendre of both a listening ear and a note with an emanating sound wave. With that in mind, I'd like to depict the symbol as active, focused and stimulated. Any bright colour might achieve this, but some perhaps more better than others. I'm particularly interested in experimenting with oranges and greens to depict these qualities. So let's begin in bringing that extra bit of life to the ear stroke note symbol, starting with the first logo at top left. So selecting the symbol, I've decided to begin, I'm going to experiment with a light orange. So in the spectrum here in the colour panel, I'm going to fish around until I find a light orange which looks good. I'm going to let go here. And I'm happy with that. So moving on to the next, highlighting the symbol. I'm going to do the same again, but this time I'm going to go for a more murky orange, almost rusty. So here we go. I'm happy with that. I think I'll just adjust this very slightly, bring the cyan up, just to give it a bit more of a rusty feel. It's almost verging on red. So on to the next. I am going to select a red colour here for this one. So in the spectrum once again in the colour panel, I'm going to fish around with that eyedropper tool to select a red. Now I'm going to begin with a bright red, like so. And then for the next, I'm going to choose a red, which is a little bit more murky, like that orange. And I'm happy with that also. So moving on to the logo below, I'm now going to experiment with a green, because a green obviously depicts active, alive, much like a plant. So once again, going back to the spectrum, I'm going to fish around there with that eyedropper tool for a light green. I'm going to stop there. And I'm just going to bring that up slightly in the cyan and the black. And with that done, I'm happy with that also. So next, I'm going to try another tone of green on the symbol on the top right logo here. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to go to the spectrum once again and fish out a green that's darker than the previous. And I quite like that, but I'm going to use the sliders just to fine tune. Bring up the magenta and the cyan there, and a little bit of black. So there we go, there's a nice tone of green, which is darker than the previous, but still bright. So next, I didn't have this colour in mind, but I do want to explore it, and that's blue. Certainly a light blue. So going to the spectrum once again, the colour panel, I'm going to fish out a light blue. And that's very nice. I'm going to keep that as it is without any fine adjustments, and I'm going to move on to the next. I'm going to match that blue actually with the colour picker, and I'm going to make it a little bit darker by using the sliders in the colour panel. So I've brought up the black, the magenta and the cyan there. Like so. Now I don't feel as if that's very bright, and so I'm going to match it again. I'm just going to try a different slider, the magenta maybe, just a little bit black, and I'm going to bring down the cyan to create a colour such as this, and that's very pleasing to the eye. But it doesn't seem to go too well with that particular black. The black is a bit too domineering over the lighter kind of tone of that symbol. But anyways, we go on to the next, and I'm going to experiment also with a yellow. So back to the spectrum, let's pick out a yellow. It can't be too light, otherwise it will merge with the white of the screen and of course paper. So we need at least some magenta in it to bring it up to like halfway between yellow and an orange. So moving up that magenta slider, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. So that represents an option with a nice yellow there. So moving on to the last, I'm going to select the symbol, and for this I'm going to choose a teal colour. So selecting a kind of teal from the swatches, I'm then going to adjust this with the sliders. So bringing down the magenta, bringing down the cyan, just to make this more brighter, more vivid in colour. And there we have it. So now we have a nice bright teal colour as one of the options. So that's 10 options in total, each with a different coloured black and a different coloured symbol, all ready for review. So here we have the 10 logo colour versions for review. The first at top left sees the original idea of using a medium orange colour for the symbol. The colour is bright and active, so I feel this works well in conveying the qualities of active, focused and stimulated with regards to the concept of musical note with sound wave and human ear. The black it's coupled with for the text is a suitable tone too, since it's not too dark enough to overpower the orange. The next logo sees a more darker, rusty orange symbol. This too works great in depicting the aforementioned qualities and is a little more prominent and striking. I may prefer this one over the previous logo for those reasons, but I'd need to experiment to confirm. The darker black text too with a hint of magenta complements this deeper orange also. Next you see a bright red employed for the symbol. Again, this portrays the symbol to be alive and active, but it may be a little bit too intensive. Considering that the symbol partially depicts a human ear, I'm keen not to use red to avoid depicting danger or soreness. The black is quite dark with a reasonable amount of cyan, magenta and yellow added, and it works well with the intense red. And the logo down we see a much darker red moving into the realm of maroon. This looks a bit murky, doesn't stand out and wouldn't be considered as bright as the client stipulated. The black in contrast melds well with the colour of the symbol, but almost too much to a point where the symbol is drowned out. Finally, at the bottom of this column, we see a version with a symbol coloured a bright and prominent green. This works well in depicting the aforementioned qualities and works well for both note and ear concepts, but I'm not convinced that green is the colour I'd like to adopt for this brand, since I'd want it to be a little bit more intense. This black slightly clashes with the green too, since it perhaps contains too much magenta. Moving on to top right, we see a more darker green, but one which is still relatively bright. I feel as if we are beginning to escape the feel of music at this point, and the ear shape coloured green could hint towards a hearing medical solution. High in cyan and magenta, the black seems to work well, but the green is not something I'd like to explore for the aforementioned reason. Next we see a version of the logo incorporating a bright light blue symbol. Although this looks good, it appears to be a little too calming and non-intensive. I also don't wish to depict a cold, non-stimulated ear, so for this point alone, this is one I'll reject. As a matter of conversation, the black in contrast to this colour could perhaps be a little bit more lighter too. Moving down to a version of the logo which features a duller version of the previous colour, nearing into lavender. This colour looks good, but I feel I've lost brightness and the desired qualities at this point. This could appear to be too downbeat and a little floral. The black in contrast is too dark also, though the high levels of magenta work well with complementing this colour. Below we see the symbol coloured a bright yellow. This looks like the most upbeat and alive version of the logo on the canvas, but again it's possibly too floral, though the black with its hint of yellow works perfectly with this colour. The yellow perhaps won't stand out enough too on white backgrounds. So the natural direction to head towards from yellow would be orange, and so it's the orange I will favour over this, at least as a point to begin experimentation. Lastly, we see the teal coloured symbol. This is quite unique and reminiscent of 1960s pastel colours. This colour functions very well on an aesthetic level, but again it's a little bit too calm. The black high in cyan, magenta and yellow works well, though the black could be reduced to tone it down slightly. With regret for the reason previously mentioned, I know this will be one I'll be rejecting. So with focus upon those which I prefer, I feel like the orange colour is serving as the happy medium between the alive feeling of the yellow and the intensiveness of the red. The orange too doesn't have any negative connotations with regards to the ear or note concept. As such, I'm going to bring the two orange logos at the top left into the next stage for further adjustment and experimentation. So here I've taken the logos with the two orange symbols in their original state shown up top. Beneath those I have each with a version of the black text tones from the teal version and the red version of the previous stage. From these I can decide upon a suitable orange and a suitable black which contrasts nicely. So looking at the left column first, I feel as though the black in the original logo at the top works best. This slightly faded black works well against this moderate orange. The version below has hints of cyan, magenta and yellow to the black, which is a little distracting in contrast, and the bottom logo features a black which is too dark on the whole. Most importantly, I feel this particular orange is a little bit too meek and needs a little bit more of a figurative punch by way of making the colour a little bit stronger. Now looking at the right hand side column, of the two oranges left and right, I feel like this one works best for the fact that it's darker, standing a little more dominant and vibrant without being murky or pale. This orange too sits at the threshold before it becomes a red, which I wish to avoid. I feel like the bottom logo features text which is too dark, nearing a jet black, and the middle logo has the same introduction of colours previously mentioned, which are a little odd and distracting. As such, with all critique in mind, I've reached a decision. The logo at top right is my chosen colour, and thus this represents the final completed logo design for True Tone amplification. So let's take a look back to summarise the development process of the True Tone logo. True to fashion, we began with the completed client questionnaire. This of course stipulated that True Tone was the name of the business, or True Tone Amplification in full, with amplification acting as a tagline. Their product, amplifiers, are aimed at guitarists, acoustic guitarists and bassists of all ages. The client stated that they wished for a logo with an icon above, at the side of text or incorporated into the text. The icon needed to depict a perfect tone. A mood board was compiled comprising of images of logos of existing guitar, audio and amplifier companies acquired from Google Images. Images of actual guitars and amplifiers featured in the mood board too, just to get a feel for the overall topic. This mood board served as inspiration for the forthcoming mind mapping process. In the mind mapping process, the full company name, True Tone Amplification, was written in the middle of a piece of paper. Towards the top of the piece of paper, words which reminded me of true and tone were noted in this area, and a branch off those ideas to give birth to more. In a similar manner, I done the same with the bottom area of the page for the word amplification. Any ideas garnered from the mood board were also written down. Occasionally I do the odd doodle. At the bottom right of the page I doodled a picture of an eighth note and an ear shape, and realised the two were a similar form, and so I carried this notion over into the rough sketching stage. In the rough sketching stage I drew out the original shape of the eighth note, which I researched on Google. From this point I took the graphic through several iterations to make it more cursive, more abstract and more pleasing to the eye. Most importantly, I focused on trying to make the note into an ear shape whilst retaining its overall form. Next came the refinement sketching stage. The chosen shape was replicated on dot paper in a more precise and perfect manner so that I could place and trace it in the software. Placing the image in the software, geometrical shapes and the pen tool were utilised to digitise the symbol using flowing curves through strategic placement of anchor points. After carefully selecting a range of fonts, I carefully whittled down to something which was suitable for the text for the True Tone logo. This font was then married with the symbol. Next came the cleanup process, in which I analysed the form of the traced down font to review and fix curves which did not flow as well as I'd like. The same treatment was given to the symbol, ensuring that it too consisted only of nice flowing curves to form an overall aesthetically pleasing shape. With the main elements of the logo perfected, I strategically selected a suitable font for the amplification tagline. This type was treated to precision kerning, using shapes to measure between each character. Each character was carefully analysed and the N was adjusted to flow more effectively in its curves. After some quick alignment and some elements added to either side of the tagline to establish a greater sense of balance, the logo was then graced with a series of colour options, and eventually a final orange to depict the qualities of being active, focused and stimulated was applied. And so a logo sporting a fantastic double entendre of note and ear was finally established to become the brand image for True Tone amplification. Thanks for your interest in taking this logo design activity. Please see the client questionnaire in the resources. Submit screenshots of your work and I'll take the time to provide one-on-one critique. Please remember to include all stages of planning: mood board, mind map, rough sketches and refinement sketch. I look forward to connecting with you to see your creative efforts. Test your skills by trying your hand at designing a logo design from scratch. Choose from any of the following logo design assignments, review the associated questionnaire and get started. When you've completed all of the following for each project, mood board, mind map, rough sketches, refinement sketch and your final logo design, join us in the Q&A and I'll be more than happy to give you my comprehensive feedback. I'll also provide support through the entire revision process so that we can go back and forth as much as you like. We'll continue until we reach a pleasing logo design solution that we're both happy with. So choose an assignment, give your full effort and I'll speak to you soon. In the following lecture I've laid out some projects for you to try. There are several projects, but please only attempt one of them to begin. By taking part in only one project, you prevent making the same mistakes across several projects. Instead, I can give my feedback to the initial project and you can take part in the next project with newly acquired knowledge. This will allow you to use each project to advance in your skills. Thanks for your interest in taking this logo design activity. Please see the client questionnaire in the resources. Submit screenshots of your work and I'll take the time to provide one-on-one critique. Please remember to include all stages of planning: mood board, mind map, rough sketches and refinement sketch. I look forward to connecting with you to see your creative efforts. Thanks for your interest in taking this logo design activity. Please see the client questionnaire in the resources. Submit screenshots of your work and I'll take the time to provide one-on-one critique. Please remember to include all stages of planning: mood board, mind map, rough sketches and refinement sketch. I look forward to connecting with you to see your creative efforts. Thanks for your interest in taking this logo design activity. Please see the client questionnaire in the resources. Submit screenshots of your work and I'll take the time to provide one-on-one critique. Please remember to include all stages of planning: mood board, mind map, rough sketches and refinement sketch. I look forward to connecting with you to see your creative efforts. Thanks for your interest in taking this logo design activity. Please see the client questionnaire in the resources. Submit screenshots of your work and I'll take the time to provide one-on-one critique. Please remember to include all stages of planning: mood board, mind map, rough sketches and refinement sketch. I look forward to connecting with you to see your creative efforts. Thanks for your interest in taking this logo design activity. Please see the client questionnaire in the resources. Submit screenshots of your work and I'll take the time to provide one-on-one critique. Please remember to include all stages of planning: mood board, mind map, rough sketches and refinement sketch. I look forward to connecting with you to see your creative efforts. Test your skills by trying your hand at designing a logo design from scratch. Choose from any of the following logo design assignments, review the associated questionnaire and get started. When you've completed all of the following for each project: mood board, mind map, rough sketches, refinement sketch and your final logo design, join us in the Q&A and I'll be more than happy to give you my comprehensive feedback. I'll also provide support through the entire revision process so that we can go back and forth as much as you like. We'll continue until we reach a pleasing logo design solution that we're both happy with. So choose an assignment, give your full effort and I'll speak to you soon. Test your skills by trying your hand at designing a logo design from scratch. Choose from any of the following logo design assignments, review the associated questionnaire and get started. When you've completed all of the following for each project: mood board, mind map, rough sketches, refinement sketch and your final logo design, join us in the Q&A and I'll be more than happy to give you my comprehensive feedback. I'll also provide support through the entire revision process so that we can go back and forth as much as you like. We'll continue until we reach a pleasing logo design solution that we're both happy with. So choose an assignment, give your full effort, and I'll speak to you soon.